Hello everybody, welcome back to another stream. Hope you're doing well. I forgot to pull up my playlist. Alright, here we go. Alright, so yesterday's stream, we watched I Did Not Understand Dark Souls by MGM Corruptions. Then we followed that up with Let's Go Down the Souls Rabbit Hole with King Jiffy Coats, followed by Connections Between Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and Sekiro by Z Voke. And then we finished up with two more videos rather than just one because we took a little bit less time. And they were Elden Ring's Gnostic Cosmology by Infomercial, and then Square Table Gaming's Elden Ring Lore, Rosis Doesn't Exist. So I remember when I first was looking at my videos, I originally wanted to put the Rosis one next to this video by Emerald Gecko because the thumbnails are really similar, so I figured they might both be talking about Rosis. So I made a little bit of a goof by winging it last night, but it's all fine and dandy. So let me remove what we've watched from the playlist now. And then for today's videos, I have Trey Rebis, the top 10 worst Soulsborne boss runbacks. And my initial guess is that the run back to Alon is the worst, but we'll find out. Then after that, I have the secret character of Elden Ring's DLC with an interrobang by the Emerald Gecko. Then, since we did enjoy Ontos's video about the Crucible Knights, because that was more mechanically driven, we're going to instead watch one of his lore videos with Miquella, the Rebis child of Radagon and Marika, / the point of it all. So, for anybody who may not know, I'm not exactly the biggest fan of the alchemical relations being placed onto Elden Ring, so I'm a little bit apprehensive about coming into this video, but nonetheless, we will watch it and comment what we will. Alright, so then after that, I figured we could watch The Paradox of Godrick the Grafted, Elden Ring Lore by Lorebrain. I don't know if I've watched anything by Lorebrain before, apt channel name, so we'll see how that goes. So, everybody, welcome on in back to the channel. Ask Next, nice to see you again. Samurai Solo, nice to see you. Yada, Scowleasy, Vacuous, Play Capenda. Wow, you guys are popping off tonight. No Faith is pretty strong in DS3. Oh, you thought he was responding to an Elden Ring question? Okay, you guys are talking about all that stuff. And howdy, I don't remember if I said your name here, but welcome back into the stream, everyone. So, let's go ahead and dive on into our first video with the top 10 worst Soulsborne boss runbacks by Trey Rebis. We watched another one of his videos. It was like Christmas holiday themed because he had the Santa hat on. The top 10 trolls of the From Software. And I was very disappointed he didn't include Miyazaki choosing the pendant. He did actually reply to my comment, so that was kind of fun, but maybe we will have Alon show up here as well.
Boss run.
Alright, so let's go ahead and get our captions working. Here we go.
Boss runbacks. They're cool, right? No, I hate them. This is my list of the top 10 worst
Rat,
boss
welcome to
runbacks
chat. Nice
I
to see
can
you
think
again, man.
of in any of the FromSoft games. But first, you knew I was going to have a couple of honorable mentions, right? The first one is from Dark Souls 1, and I am of course talking about the run to Seath, the bitch-ass Scaleless. Now odds are, you won't have to do this run, but if you do, you've got quite a run ahead of you, because you've got to go down a ladder that you can't jump, because if you do, you take fall damage. Then
Yeah, this is a pretty bad, well, I don't know, like it's, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a bad run back. It's super tedious, and it can be really lame to fall off an invisible cliff, so I'm actually kind of surprised that this didn't make the top 10, so I'm a little bit scared to see what the rest of them are. Not because of I would disagree, but just to re-walk down memory lane and everything. You call them the walk of shame? Yeah. I say it's like the video game walk of shame, because, a real walk of shame is a little bit different, but yeah. Why are there clams? So that's a good question. I don't know if you're actually being serious about that, but one common theory is that with Seath researching like the curse and humanity and whatnot, he could have inadvertently created the man-eater clams, and that also can tie into like the Duke or Earl of Arstor and whatnot, because they like make essentially pearls and the curse bite rings, or not the curse bite rings, but the wow, why am I blanking out? They're called the things that actually remove purging stones from the man-eater clams. Hey, Jay Dixon, welcome back in. You don't remember the Seath walkback? You're probably repressing it from your memory, right?
You have to sprint across that grassy knoll and get chased by crystal golems just wanting to put their big old crystal fist just right up your little undead ass. And then you get to run across those invisible pathways that I don't really find to be that bad. It may just be because I'm so used to them now, but you're just making a really long haul all the way back to that boss again. And if you're not careful, those stupid clam guys, they can like kind of clip you on the way back to his room, and yeah, it's not a good time. The second honorable mention is from none other than Bloodborne, and of course, I am talking this time about the run to Martyr Logarius.
I forgot for a second what the theme of it was. I'm like, oh, he's going to say the Forbidden Woods. Everybody hates the Forbidden Woods. But yeah, this is the boss run back. Martyr Logarius, it really isn't the worst, but yeah, it is kind of long and tedious. So yeah, I think this is a pretty good honorable mention. But man, now I actually am really wondering what made the top 10 if these two didn't make it. I guess I kind of suppressed memories of how long the boss runbacks really were. I feel like at least 4 of the top 10 would be Dark Souls alone. So maybe another really bad one off the top of my head is Castle or Tower Latria, when you're trying to like go through the Mind Flayers to fight the King in Yellow, the Monk in Yellow, or whatever you call him. Yeah, I don't think Logarius is that bad, so it makes sense that this is kind of just like an honorable mention. You hated the ghosts in the library? Yeah, I think the only really problematic part is if you don't have enough stamina when you climb the ladder, and then the dude with the blow dart can actually knock you off the ladder if he hits you and your stamina bar gets depleted to below 0. You just let go of the ladder. I've seen people fall to their deaths from that, and that's really funny.
If you fall to Martyr Logarius, which you probably will, because let's face it, he's pretty tough.
Oh yeah, no, Mortis is absolutely right. The worst run back is definitely Frigid Outskirts. To be honest, I don't even consider that like a boss run back, because I like to pretend that area doesn't exist. Yeah. Blue Smelter in the top 5. Yeah, that one's really bad. Yeah, holy crap. Yeah, I don't know what's worse, Blue Smelter or Alon. I feel like Blue Smelter, because, yeah, a lot can go wrong there, where, like, Alon is just a bit more formulaic and a little bit less tedious than, like, actually frustrating. Blue Smelter is worse than Frigid. I could see why someone would say that, for sure, because at least with the Frigid thing, it's... I don't want to say, like, it's more manageable, but there's, like, some less frustrations to go along with that.
Your run starts off running through a building, getting screamed at by ghosts, which aren't really that bad if you got your sound turned down a little bit. But the real kicker is when you have to go climb the ladder, which takes forever. Then you are going to be shot at by Mr. Blow Dart Man, and
I think my favorite part of this clip so far is rather than grabbing the ladder when you initiate the little blood stain message thing. I guess that wasn't the blood stain, but yeah. Just a little bit of a added nuisance going back to Logarius. Rhinus Iris, welcome back to chat. Nice to see you again. You don't remember specifically hating any runbacks? Yeah, for me, I guess it was the Alon one, and I guess the reason that one sticks out into my mind is because I hate that there was no iframes in DS2 for like going through doors, and it just takes so freaking long. So I felt like that one, more than most of the others, was just annoying because if the mechanics were slightly different, it really wouldn't have been a problem at all. So it just felt like a little bit of salt in the wound to me, I suppose.
Be
For
shot
Raditz, Ornstein, and Smoke.
by Mr. Blood
That one isn't
Man
too bad. It's
and
just kind of like a
screw him and
long-
the horse that he rode in on. Then you get to do some parkour across the rooftops, which also kind of takes a minute. And
Jay Dixon said Lady Maria was a killer. Oh man, I couldn't stand how long that run back was from the Living Failures to get all the way back to Lady Maria.
then the last little lash that they get on you when you're trying to get to the boss is you take some fall damage, making it impossible to face Martyr Logarius with a full health bar and full heals in your inventory. Sucky. Now let's get to...
Actually, you can use the golden blood tinge gem that you get from Vicar Amelia and heal. But no, that would be one way to do it. But he is right that it is ever so slightly annoying if you like to be fully topped off to face a boss.
some real bullshit.
Number 10.
Old King Allant.
Yeah, this one's
This is
pretty
the
bad.
first
It's
boss
not the
run
worst,
back
but...
we're going to have on the list from Demon Souls. And when you...
Actually, yeah, I take it back. Just because the freaking elevator, I think you couldn't reset it, so you had to wait for it twice or something like that, just because of the way the elevators worked in Demon Souls. Maybe I'm misremembering. Yeah. Because I didn't really mind, like... So, to me, the run back to Elan is, like, two parts, where it's the run from the actual bonfire and then, like, through the wyvern area. So that's, like, the first half in my mind, and then the other half is just waiting for the stupid elevator.
Fight Old King Allant, there is a very good chance that you're going to die the first time because
The elevator
he is
resets? Okay.
the
It's time to go
hardest
down.
boss in the game. The run to Old King Allant begins with two archers shooting at you just as soon as you start making your way to him. Then you have to climb some stairs, deal with a couple red-eye knights, which are probably, you know, the toughest just regular enemies you can run into in the game. And I'm gonna say this run back would have been a lot higher if it wasn't for the fact that there is a shortcut allowing you to totally skip that dragon and the pyromancer guys, because oh my god, if you had to deal with that on every single run back, that would be just straight up hell. The last thing about this run back that just really brings my piss to a boil is the part where you get on the elevator that is the longest elevator that has ever existed. And I just want to know how come it couldn't have been slow like the first time, and then every subsequent time you have to do this, maybe just make it instant, or...
That's a funny idea. I feel like the real FromSoft design choice back in the day would have to have it like slow down every time, or just like have it be slower if you're in spirit form or something like that. Was the run back worse in the remake? I don't think so. The remake should have had the exact same gameplay mechanics as the original. The only thing that they added was like the one armor set if you completed everything and got the secret room to go with it, I think. It's actually better in the remake? Interesting. Oh, the remake, they added the shortcut? Oh, so the remake added the ladder, so that didn't exist before? I didn't know that. I thought the remake was actually supposed to be like a one-to-one type thing. Today I learned. Cool, thanks.
You know, make it like the elevator on Symphony of the Night. That's a elevator.
Number 9.
Grave Lord Nito. Are you surprised that the hardest level in Dark Souls also has the worst boss run back? You really shouldn't be, right?
I actually didn't... I mean, there are certainly parts of this one that are annoying. I don't know if this is really worse in my mind than... what was one of the honorable mentions? There was Martyr Logarius and then that other one. Oh, Seath. I don't know, because like the Seath one is really long and drawn out and more boring to me, whereas like at least this had a little bit of stuff to it. But I think just with the nature of the fight of Nito after that, I don't think like the run back itself is super bad. I mean, it's not great, don't get me wrong, but if you got the bonfire, it's a pretty straight shot to it for the most part. Baby
The run to
skellies are cute, though.
Gravelord Nito involves the player having to run past those horrible skeleton bears that just haunt my dreams. And this is a really long run. So you have to deal with the skeleton beasts. You have to run around the skeleton pillars that pop up and just scare the shit out of you. They're not that difficult to deal with. You can just run around them. But you're having to run around them on a ledge that you could, misstep and fall. So could be an instant death there. But you have the psychological damage of them popping up and scaring you every time you make this run. And
I was not expecting that, and just like the mental image that came to mind right then was freaking Will Ferrell in Elf doing the product quality assurance testing for the Jack in the Boxes. So just like the mental damage of those things, yeah, that just never occurred to me.
we have to deal with the cave full of pinwheels just all over the place, spamming lasers at you as much as possible. And the last annoying thing about this run is that you have to take quite a considerable chunk of fall damage just to enter the boss's arena.
Yeah, and I think that's the worst part of the run back. And so I'm getting the vibe that Trey Irby just really hates not being at full health facing a boss, which is totally understandable there.
Nito.
Number 8.
Executioner's Chariot.
Oh yeah, this
Now,
one's terrible.
my
I'm surprised
friends,
it's this low.
We're getting to the
Well, maybe I'm
legendary
not.
king of the shitty runbacks, Dark Souls 2. The run back to the Executioner's Chariot is a pretty long trek.
Man, having the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles music in the background is like extra PTSD triggering.
You have to go through the woods, dodge the butterflies that drop poison on you. There's a few spooky dudes hanging around with, those big curved swords just hiding in the woods behind trees trying to get you. You have to cross 2 bridges, and then you get to this area that's like a little valley between this rock formation, and this area is really the worst spot in the run back because these scary executioner guys that have these axes, they can just clip you while you're trying to run past them, and they'll just drop down and just scare the crap out of you, and they'll be hitting you with this long-reaching weapon they got. It's really hard to get past these guys without getting hit.
So Ethnex brought up a pretty good point that you could essentially kill all of the enemies in Dark Souls 2 completely. However, isn't it that you need to kill them all 12 times? Or not like all of them, you need to kill an enemy 12 times before they stop showing up? Honestly, that feels like more attempts than many boss fights, especially in Dark Souls 2, to be honest. So I don't know if that's like a valid defense. And in some ways it's worse because it's like, do you go to the boss and then stop until you like kill every enemy? It just, I don't know. But I do appreciate the point nonetheless. And then Chadwick said, this is the part of Dark Souls that remembers the shoot 'em up days of past, or shoot 'em ups of days past. You need to memorize and perfectly execute them all to get back to the boss with full health for the 1000th attempt. Yeah, and I think the Executioner's Chariot probably took me the most attempts of any boss in Dark Souls 2 because I played through the game blind and I had no idea about the mechanic. And I felt so stupid because literally the first time I got to the boss, I wasn't really looking at the floor after the cutscene. And so I just moved to the right and then immediately fell to my death. And then I had to make the boss run back and then do that all over again. I think I probably went to this area a little bit under-leveled because it was really difficult for me to try to deal with all of the little skeleton boys and the necromancers. And I think part of that is also because at that point in the game, I was like going pure magic and I didn't really have anything invested into my dagger to make life easier for myself. So a lot of skill issue on my part on that first time through, but yeah. It can be pretty rough out there. Hey, Morlor, welcome back to the stream, as well as Bella. Nice to see both of you. Gravity, that's the real boss for sure. Hey, Without Horns, nice to have you again. There's a Covenant. Yeah, you can use the Covenant of Champions to make sure that the enemies like don't stay extinct, but it also makes them more difficult, which is... I wish there was like a middle ground between that so you could have the enemies like keep spawning like they should be, but didn't make it arbitrarily more difficult. Alon is overheated. It's a bad run back, but it's not that bad. Yeah, I think like in retrospect, the actual run back isn't that bad, but the thing that annoys me the most about it is that you can't just skip all of the enemies by walking through the door like you can in pretty much every other FromSoft game. Yeah, Covenant of Champions is hard mode.
Then the last one has a whip with dark magic imbued into it. That's great. If you manage to actually make it past these guys, and I have died just going through that little area where they're at, but if you do manage to get past them, there's a scary bridge with holes in it, so you gotta be careful crossing that. And the last thing that they have are two naked dudes hanging off the bottom of the bridge to jump scare you, catch you off guard. I hate doing this run. It doesn't sound as bad, but when you do it, it sucks.
Number 7.
Blue Smelter Demon.
Wow, it's this low.
Okay, now we're really getting into the really...
I'm like getting really scared if we've got these two on so low on the list. Man. Okay, I'm just trying to mentally prepare for what's coming up next.
bad ones. The run back to the Blue Smelter Demon is infested with enemies. There are enemies every few steps, and they're all much bigger than you and have a weapon the size of your body, and they are really hard to avoid. To make it even worse, there are some douchebag mages casting this magic that actually slows your running down, making it even harder to dodge this infested hallway full of enemies.
And before anybody in chat says, well, actually, this is a co-op area, joke's on you, no, it's not anymore. The DS2 servers are dead, get wrecked. GG no re.
And if you manage to get past these guys, there is an even bigger guy with an even bigger weapon. This run back is nightmare fuel for me. And to top it off, you're dealing with the Blue Smelter Demon. He's one of the hardest enemies in Dark Souls 2, and there's a very good chance you're gonna die to him. All I can say is get prepared to do this one a couple times.
Yeah, so the Blue Smelter Demon was especially rough for me because when I was playing through Dark Souls 2 my final time, the time I actually completed the game, I was doing a lore-based playthrough, which means I was pretty much primarily going to get footage, so I was playing HUDless. You know what is not very clear about the Blue Smelter Demon? That he has a frickin' AoE aura of fire that if you stand close to him, you just take burning damage over time. So I died a couple times. I'm like, what the hell? He didn't even hit me. Well, joke's on me. He didn't need to hit me to kill me. So yeah. Yeah, as next, the DS2 servers, I think, died unironically last week is when they like pulled the plug on them. Oh, is it just for PS3? Okay, not PS4? Okay. So I didn't have the full info there, so I guess there is a re with the GG. The regular smaller Smelter Demon has it too? Maybe. Okay, I thought he did have a thing, but I couldn't quite remember, and I must not have died to him, because like the regular Smelter Demon I killed extremely quickly. Because by the time I'd gotten to the old Iron Keep, I was pretty good with like my magic setup at that point, and didn't stand too close to him, I don't think. He fell over pretty quick. Same with the old Iron King.
Number 6.
Sir Alon. The run back to Sir Alon somehow manages to be even worse than the Blue Smelter Demon run, due to the fact that on Sir Alon's run, you have these skeleton knights with these katanas that they're constantly running straight at you and stabbing you the whole way through. Now that's already really intense because you're constantly dodging and running and rolling just the whole way to this boss. Then you have the lizards shooting fireballs at you at the same time, so you could get stabbed by a skeleton, then whacked by a fireball, and you know, you're not gonna have time to heal because there's another skeleton and another fireball coming in just a second. And when you get to the end of the run, there are archers trying to shoot at you. So you could potentially get caught with an arrow while you're going to the far
I forgot
wall
about
and
Dark
die.
Lurker. Oh no.
Oh, and Sir Alon, he's hard as a T-Rex's shit. Enjoy.
Wait. Is that because they're fossilized now? I don't understand that reference whatsoever.
Number 5.
Gank Squad. The Afflicted Grave Robber, Ancient Soldier Varg, and Sarah the Old Explorer. Yeah, Gank Squad is definitely much easier to say.
Yeah, I was wondering if this was going to show up, but honestly, I don't remember the run back to this boss. I just kind of remember the run back to Blue Smelter Demon, and I try to erase the entirety of this section of the DLC from my mind. That run stopped you from beating Alon, and you did Dark Lurker? Understandable. You like DS2 for actually making you engage with the game? Never understood the other games, letting you run past almost every enemy feel self-defeating, like why? Yeah, that is something that I do wish there was a little bit of more deliberation to consider in terms of like, maybe you need to defeat a certain 1 or 2 enemies per run back or something along those lines, because I do think it feels really cheesy when you can run past every enemy. So with that, I feel like even the Alon run back, it wouldn't be that bad, and I don't think it would be that cheesy because it's difficult enough to navigate that kind of arena, I guess, without getting hit to begin with. So if you could have just walked through the door, I don't feel like that one is that bad, but I definitely know what you mean about the other games for sure. Sounds like this guy just hates DS2, to be honest. I mean, other than DS2 and Demon Souls, I feel like the other games' runbacks generally aren't that punishing. Dark Souls 3 especially doesn't have very bad runbacks, I think. What would be the worst for Dark Souls 3? Like, Lothric? Maybe Yorm? But, like, even those two aren't that bad. Aren't there also a bunch of weird barbarian dudes on the Alon run? Is that in the Alon run, or is that, like, a different part of the tower, or whatever you want to call it? Hey, Spaghetti, nice to see you again. I can't even see reality properly. Hey, it's what I heard. Lothric has a great shortcut. Oh, yeah, it does have that one next to the boss, too. Yeah, so Lothric is way easier than I was thinking, because I kind of forgot about that. I mean, I didn't forget about the elevator. I just, like, don't have to use it that much. I don't know. Hey, Drew, nice to see you again. Aldrich is a bit annoying. Yeah, but there's, like, nothing too crazy there. Okay.
The run back to these 3 assholes is really something. You have those lizards with the statues blocking your path. You've got knights running at you, swinging shit at you the whole time you're running. You have statues spitting petrify at you. Also, we're in a dark cave, so it's really easy to get turned around and lost in this particular run back. And the best part is, when you get to the very end, there are just a couple more of those petrify statues that potentially could end your life right there before you even make it to the fog wall. Finally, these 3 are really cheesy and really annoying, And if you don't have a summon, you're probably going to lose. Good luck.
No.
Yeah, I don't remember how many attempts it took me to do that, but I legitimately don't remember almost anything about that run back. So maybe I one-shot the boss with a lot of struggle, because I remember it was extremely painful trying to fight all three of them and like kite them around and have enough time to like cast a magic. But I mean, at that point by the DLC, you probably have enough heals where you could just win that battle of attrition if you're able to not get caught off guard, perhaps. So yeah, now I'm really curious if like the run back to the Rotten is going to be up there. Like it's not a particularly good run back, but it's also not the worst, and I don't think it would be like higher than this. So it looks like we have another Demon Souls one next, which, all right. Yeah, bow and magic helps with the statues. DS2, a lot more than the other games, feels like ranged options are nearly mandatory. Grave Robbers had a super easy run back. You don't know what this guy's talking about. Bed of Chaos, is that run back? That one never really bothered me. Oh yeah, maybe that's a lot worse if you don't have the Witch Covenant. No, because I mean, even that one doesn't bother me. I don't know. I'm like one of the weird ones where Lost Izalith in general doesn't bother me that much, but I know like a lot of people really hate it. I think I only died like once or twice to the Bed of Chaos on my first run, and so it just didn't really bother me. A Bed of Chaos run back was good for the epic slide he got to do. True story. Spaghetti says the run back with the poison spitting statues is the worst. It makes you want to quit every time you play Dark Souls 2. So now I'm curious if you're talking about the Grave Robbers or the Rotten. The stupid hand monsters are awful? Okay, so you're talking about the Rotten. Rat thinks the only iffy thing on the Bed of Chaos run back was the Chaos Eater? Really? Because I don't even remember, like, needing to particularly interact with any enemies. I think maybe there's, like, one of the small, like, imp statue type things, but... Alright, welcome back to the present, Morlor. The Lothric run back is annoying. Yeah, I mean, but it's just like an elevator once you unlock that. Yeah, I feel like the Rotten is pretty bad, but it's so short it kind of makes up for it. Oh yeah, there's the bonfire with Lucatiel. Yeah, never mind. No, I take the Rotten run back. Back? Kind of weird sentence. You can run past it, but if you get unlucky, you get the Acid Blender special? I don't remember what Chaos Eater you're talking about. From, like, the front. Do you need to fight one? Maybe? Oh, yeah, I don't know. I just never had issues with it. The Radagon run back is annoying for the blinding light. It should be on this list? Okay. Clown needs to sleep, but he wants to see number one. Alright, I'll stop pausing.
Number 4.
Old Hero. This boss run has you going the most
massive
distance. It's pretty insane. You have to deal with rolling skeletons, these super tall alien-looking dudes who shoot scary green lasers at you, and did I mention that it's a long run to this boss? The one saving grace is if you do bring soul remains, you can throw them to distract the enemies that are going to be blocking your path. Some of them you're almost going to have to kill, but soul remains can occasionally let you slide by. Also,
so the funny thing is, and on my Demon Souls run that Rat forced me to do on stream, I struggled a lot when I was playing it live for you guys, but when I played it on my own, I didn't have any issues, and that's because I was using the ring that made you silent when you moved around, and that is such a game changer for this run back in general, and even like the Old Hero, obviously, because he's blind, and so if you make him deaf as well, he's nigh on useless and is a pushover. So it's kind of funny how some of these bosses in Demon Souls were kind of a lot more gimmicky, and I do know a decent amount of people want those types of gimmicks to come back to some degree, which I can empathize with to a decent amount. Yeah, the thief ring, thanks Mortis, it's broken.
So you're going to want to use the thief ring because
Okay, there we
the thief
go.
ring will help any enemies that are not very close to you de-aggro. And the thief ring, most importantly, is going to be used when you fight this boss. Because
Yeah, I'm trying to think if this run back is worse than the Elan one without the thief ring, and it might actually be. I think I could potentially agree with this one.
if you do not cheese this boss, there is a chance, no matter how slight, that you'll have to do this run again.
No matter how
And
slight.
that
Number 3.
ancient dragon. So now we're back to Dark Souls 2 again. Did you miss it? Well, I've got news for you. The top 3 worst boss runs are all from Dark Souls 2.
Oh boy. So, holy crap, is that 8 of them on this list? Has it literally just been Demon Souls and Dark Souls 2?
The ancient dragon has a long run. However, what makes the run even longer is the fact that you have to kill every single large knight in this area. And if you do not stop and fight each one and defeat him, the little dragon knights will aggro and proceed to swarm your ass until you are dead. Now you may think that this would be not a really big deal because why don't you just run away like you do on most
You
of
like
the
how
other
he
boss
specifies
runs,
in
right?
Scholar?
Just run to the door. Well, the problem is in Dark Souls 2, they didn't think you needed to be invincible the entire time you crossed through a fog wall. So that's just not gonna work.
What is this yellow
Also,
thing?
the ancient dragon is such a major son of a bitch and has the biggest health bar ever. I kind of feel like I'm fighting that hidden boss in Symphony of the Night in the upside down catacombs that his health bar is even bigger than Dracula's health bar. Like, what the fuck? Not to mention, his fire attack is pretty devastating. I hate fighting this guy, and I hate his boss run.
Yep.
Number
Okay,
2.
Dark Lurker
Dark
makes
Lurker.
sense. So number 1 has to be
Why do we do
Frigid
this,
Outskirts.
Was there really any call for this FromSoft? Let's not kid ourselves. You guys are pretty sick putting this boss with this boss run. If we were gonna fight, oh, I don't know, Jabba the Hutt at the end of this boss run, it wouldn't have been that bad. But we have to fight Dark Lurker, one of the most difficult bosses in the entire game. And we are faced with a boss run where, to begin, we have to find this old bitch and give him the most valuable consumable item in the entire game, a human effigy. You need human effigies to go from hollow form to have more of a health bar. You need human effigies to be human if you want to summon some help. So why in God's name would you make it to where I have to give a human effigy to refight a boss? I just don't understand you guys sometimes, FromSoft. I mean, you know, you treat us so good, and then every once in a while you do some shit like this, and I just don't understand it. So on
The funny thing is, like, the Dark Lurker runback didn't bother me so much just because these enemies were easy enough to kind of like cheese with magic for the most part. Human effigies with Loki taste like those onion chips that crunch real well.
the Dark Lurker boss run, you have to fight every NPC on the way. Now, it's not like the Ancient Dragon boss fight where there's a bunch of other NPCs that are going to swarm you if you try to skip one, but you have to find every NPC on this path and kill them, or else the way to the boss will never be opened up for you. So this boss run takes quite...
I think I did on one of my runs, like, try to kill all the enemies or something, but I didn't understand how to proceed. Maybe it wasn't like when I was actually fighting the Dark Lurker, but the first time I went in here and I like jumped off the edge because it looked like, in my mind, that was the end of the place that it needed to go to like go down. Or wait, was it that I lit the bonfire? Okay, maybe that's what it was. Maybe I like lit the bonfire, but I didn't kill everything. So after I lit the bonfire, I was like, okay, I guess I need to like sink further down, and so I jumped off and killed myself. So anyway, I don't know what I'm talking about.
Quite a while, and if you die to Dark Lurker, you get to A, do it all again, and B, pay another human effigy. And if you run out of human effigies, you get to go farm human effigies. Let me just say that one more time, nice and clear and clean and slow, so we can all just think about what FromSoft put into this fucking game that we love and enjoy. You have to farm to do a boss run. Unacceptable. Unacceptable.
To be fair, like that's pretty much all the Bloodborne ones with the Blood Vial system, Demon Souls 2.
And the #1 worst boss run in any FromSoft game is the boss run to Slave Knight Gale.
What? How? How? Is it not on the list? It's not even part of the top 10 Frigid Outskirts. My mans must have suppressed this from his memory. Top 10 anime betrayals right here. Slave Knight Gale, is this even a boss run? No, this has to be a joke. This has to be a joke. Slav Knight Gale. Has to be a joke.
No, I'm just fucking with you.
Yeah,
Slave Knight Gale, it's like 5 steps. Thank you guys for giving us that boss run. That's probably the shortest boss run I can think of in any game. The real #1 is the god dang boss run to Lud and Zalin in the Frigid Outskirts.
Yeah, at first I didn't even like process the Slave Knight Gale part. I'm like, it's not Frigid Outskirts. Oh, losing my mind.
Let me tell you this, friends. I have seen the face of true horror. Just revisiting this boss run for the purposes of making this video brought me on the verge of a panic attack. It's that bad. This is not just the worst boss run I've ever played in a FromSoft game. It's not even just the worst boss run I've ever seen in any video game. This is one of the worst things that I've ever seen in a game ever. The boss that you have to fight at the end of this run is a gank boss, so that really sucks. Second of all, the second boss that is in this fight heals himself and buffs himself. Yeah, that's bullshit.
Honestly, I didn't know that, and that makes so much more sense, because like I said, I was playing with the HUD off, so I was like, man, why does this one take so much longer to kill?
You're gonna have to do this more than once. That's just ridiculous. Ooh, boy, oh boy. Let's talk about this run. Okay, snow levels in video games are not always the most fun thing, right? There are some games that have a snow level that I really like though. For instance, the snow level on Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game. That's a great snow level. It's really fun. It's got these cool little Pizza Hut signs. Pretty sweet. But this is not like that level at all. There are no turtles performing jump kicks. There is no bear wearing a leather jacket. No, 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 no.
Oh, man,
we don't
this
get
takes
any
me
of
back.
those things. Not in the Frigid Outskirts. We get snowstorms. Snowstorms that make it to where you can't see at all. And yeah, they can cause you to start going the wrong way, making the boss run take even longer. But we're not here to talk about snow.
Are we?
We're here to talk about those f***ing reindeer. Because every time a snowstorm comes up,
Reindeer.
you get plowed back down on your ass by a huge reindeer who appears to be imbued with some sort of dark magic, and that's probably one reason that they do so much damage. And the longer you take to kill these deer, and the longer you take to clear this area, they will keep spawning. So if you're super fast and really efficient, you may get through this boss run only having to deal with 2 of these bastards. But odds are you're not gonna do that. Odds are you're gonna fight 3, 4, 5 until you're dead. I swear I hate these deer so much. They're the worst enemy I can think of in any FromSoft game, and the fact that they can fly is just insane, because anything in a FromSoft game that can fly is pretty bullshit, seeing as how Elden Ring is the only one of these games that even lets you jump, and flying enemies aren't super easy to kill even in that game.
Yeah, could you imagine trying to actually fight one of the great dragonflies, but except they could do real damage to the player? That'd be absolutely terrifying. So yeah, the funny thing is I don't really mind the reindeer one-on-one. It's just the fact that there's an infinite spawn of them, and they just home in and track your position no matter where you are, which just makes it overbearing and garbage, and that they could like double and triple up on the player. So there's a lot to dislike with Frigid Outskirts. But anyway, yeah, as more lore said, and I kind of agree with that take, that with snow levels, they're either top tier or bottom tier, and it feels like there's no in between. And who else came back into the stream? Oh yeah, Aaron Vice, welcome back to the stream, my man. Samus's missile supply would disagree. Endlessly spawning enemies might be the worst thing in video games. There are times where I want endlessly spawning enemies, and then other times where I most certainly do not. Dude, forgot Sekiro. Is there a particularly bad run back for Sekiro? I can't think of one off the top of my head. It's possible Miyazaki is responsible for the DLC areas. Okay. I mean, I'm not the type of person that like truly cares like who directed what game. But yeah. Yeah, oh yeah. That's one that I mentioned earlier, the False Monk for Demon Souls. I'm kind of surprised that didn't make the top 10. I feel like that one is definitely worse than the run back to Seath. Oh no, that was the honorable mention. What was 10? I wanted like a list at the end of this. No, but the actual run back to Genichiro really wasn't that bad, because you just jump out the window, jump up to the rooftop, and that was it. I think like, yeah. Anyway,
this boss run is the worst thing ever. If you choose to just skip this part of Dark Souls 2, I do not blame you one bit. We can all thank Gavlon that luckily these awful boss runs are probably a thing of the past.
All right, more lore. We're going to put the spotlight on you. What boss runs from the other games are worse than the ones mentioned so far, other than the Demon Souls run to the False Monk? Although, if you want to say that one, that's perfectly fair.
And let's hope it stays that way.
You were taking the wrong way to Genny.
That the world might be mended. Thank you so much for watching. Hit that like button and subscribe to be notified about future content releases. Hit me up in the comments section if you've got any video suggestions, or if you just want to tell me about some boss runs that you hate. See you soon.
So yeah, that run back to Slave Knight Gale is definitely worthy of the #1 spot. All right, but I'm going to go ahead and link the video into the chat for you guys if you want to give Trey Irby a well-deserved like. Looks like we got a bunch of DS2 lovers in his dislike categories. Bed of Chaos and a few others. Let me look back at number 10. Old King Alant. So do you think Bed of Chaos is worse than Old King Alant? You might. I'm just like legitimately curious. So yeah, I guess Alant is still kind of worse than the False Monk. I feel like Gravelord Nito is a little bit rough. Yeah, this one's deserving. Yeah, I think I would just remove Gravelord Nito and then put Alant above the Old Monk. And then I might like rearrange some of this stuff. All right. This is really funny. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. Okay, so 7 of the top 10 were devoted to DS2. That's really funny. And then what was it, like 2 were Demon Souls? Yeah. Oh man, that's rough. Nito needs to be higher for real. Oh, that's bad if you stay on that elevator too long. Oh yeah, I've done that. That's probably why the elevator annoyed me more than I think it probably should. Yeah, I think there was one time on the stream I was talking to chat and like was looking away and then the elevator went down, so that like probably bumped it up in a level of annoyance or nuisance to me. Hey Onion Knight's Tale, I like your name. You made a Dark Souls fan film centered around Siegmeyer, and it'd mean a lot if I could give it a watch. Love the work. Yeah, man, no problem. If you want me to react to a video, please leave a comment on this YouTube video, like the live thing, not in the chat, but like the actual YouTube thing, because then I'll get a notification for it, and then I'll actually remember to like look at it after stream and add it to my playlist and whatnot. Or if you want to join the Discord, oh, I didn't pin it. If you want to join the Discord, you can do that and leave a comment in the what's it called, channel feedback channel, something like that, and then I can check that out. Okay, so that's the message or the link to the Discord if you want to drop the links there. You feel like a lot of people forgive Dark Souls for DS1 for some reason, a lot of double standards. Maybe, I don't know, like DS1, I do think that Seath and the Bed of Chaos do have pretty annoying boss runbacks, but nothing was like super bad. Honestly, actually, Artorias could be pretty annoying, but even that one you can just kind of like skip most things, and then maybe the same with Manus. But they feel like a couple orders of magnitude easier than some of these ones. Gwendolyn run back can be awful? Okay, I might have missed it. Thank you. I don't feel like the run back like itself is that bad. It's just like the tedium of waiting for the bridge. He's talking about the remake run back, which is not that bad. Oh, okay, yeah, that's true. Because like the original one would be even worse. So even still, I would put Old King Alant even in the remake probably above Nito. But I don't think this one is that bad. But that could just be me because other people hate it. All right. So anyway, I really enjoyed this video by Trey Irby, the top 10 worst Soulsborne boss runbacks. So these have been 2 videos of his that I've definitely enjoyed and have been a blast to talk to stream with over. So next we'll actually transition into some lore with the secret character of Elden Ring's DLC by the Emerald Gecko, and it looks like it's supposed to be Rosis.
Hello everyone and welcome back.
Oof. Okay, and let me know how the volume ends up being for you guys. Bruh.
The video. I do hope you've had an absolutely incredible week, and I do hope you're having a great Friday. In today's video, I have for you a character that, in my opinion, has a really high chance of being a main character inside of the DLC. It's unclear whether he'll be a villain.
All right. What was that? We got some like Donnie Darko
inside of the
one
DLC.
frame type things going on.
It's unclear.
Trying to back up one frame at a time, but I can't tell if like YouTuber's just buffering or not. That's funny. So this is like the Kindred, Blackblade Kindred, I think. But it almost looks like a Deathbird, just like this thing. But oh, okay, that's because it's one of the tombs. So that's just kind of funny. I wonder if like that. Okay, so my guess is he may have like originally had a different clip here, and then he's like, okay, I don't want to use this clip. I'm going to use something else, and this might have been like a one frame legacy, which is kind of funny to me. I was wondering if it's actually going to be like important subliminal messaging. The secret character of Elden Ring's DLC is the Rebis. Oh man, you got me. Bella said that your dad told you yesterday the Elden Ring DLC got released and he's not into Souls at all, and he showed you his Xbox and it was Lords of the Fallen, and that's hilarious.
It's unclear whether he'll be a villain or a hero or an anti-hero or an anti-villain, whatever you want to call it. We really don't know.
Fine. Why did it look so janky a second ago?
It's unclear whether he'll be a villain or a hero.
Oh, okay, I think I know. Like, so I was kind of right. It seemed like he had one transition and he just may have like hesitated on where to put the transition and changed it, and so you had like a relic from a moment ago.
Or an anti-hero or an anti-villain, whatever you want to call it. We really don't know that. But all evidence points to him having some sort of involvement in the DLC. His name is Rosis, the Usherer of Death. Now, I would not blame you at all if you've never heard of this guy. I hadn't until I had went looking for lore. I have not ever seen a single video on this guy, and yet his importance is really felt around the lands between. Hell,
honestly, it's because how much content can you really... Oh, this is made 12 days ago. Joke's on him. We watched Square Tables Gaming's video from like a month or two ago. But no. In all seriousness, it's like, how can you really make a lot of content out of something which has like 2 lines of text, or probably like 5 lines total, depending on like how much flavor text you want to count, and 2 items and just like the random depictions of the statues. So I do think they're really fascinating, but for me personally, it's really hard to comment on this kind of stuff because you can, like, anybody can just insert their headcanon here, and in many ways, like, there's you just can't really dispute it, you know? So all of the evidence. Hey, Scaleezy, welcome back. Face reveals only work for serial killers? Uh-oh.
you can even find his statues everywhere. Absolutely everywhere in the lands between. Where there are catacombs, they have his statue. So why has he not been talked about? Well, I think it goes back to this old adage that we continuously see when it comes to the lore of games, and specifically Elden Ring. If it is hard and there's only one item description, people won't cover it because the likely chance of getting it to a 10-minute video is very low, and that means less revenue, which is the sad truth. But enough of that. Let's get straight into it. The first...
I mean, cynically, sure. I don't even really consider the length of my videos, but yeah, I hadn't really... He might have like something to the whole like 10-minute thing, but it's like, if you do make that video, and if you're not trying to pad it out, it's, I mean, hold on, let me try to rephrase this. If you do make a video about Rosis specifically, it's either going to be extremely short and doesn't really add much to what you have, or it's just going to end up feeling padded out and kind of like fillery, perhaps. Of course, that's not a guarantee that it's going to happen that way, but those are like 2 really big risks of covering something so small and nebulous. But also for me, I don't want to cover a lot of things which are just so open when there's a very real possibility with like the DLC or future sequels, if they ever happen, that they will just kind of upend what we know. So, of course I say that, and I've already made videos, and the DLC can still like comment on those and upend what we know about the topics that I've covered in those. But I feel like they're a lot more self-contained than a topic like Rosis specifically. He's drastically underestimating the amount of padding a YouTuber can put in a video. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and as More Lore says, Square Table Gaming's whole niche is talking about the lesser covered or lesser known parts of the lore, like 7-minute videos or less on stuff we know almost nothing about. Yeah, and to be fair, Square Table also does a pretty good job of pointing out that the dots that they're connecting is coming from speculation rather than a lot of the things directly supported by the text. So, yeah, I don't know. It's just, I don't want to say like it's not a good topic, because I mean Rosis itself is a really good topic, but there's just so much wrong, so to speak, with like the lore of the catacombs versus like everything else, that I just don't want to touch these kind of topics with like a 10-foot pole almost.
First item description, and the only one we get of Rosis, is in Rosis's axe, a ritual and ceremonial weapon that summons forth those who live in death. And while that's all cool and dandy, I know some of your ears are probably perked at the living...
No, they call those who are lost in death. Okay, so this is one of the things where I think it's really important to pay close attention to the descriptions, and hopefully I'm wrong here and just going to make an ass of myself, but Rosis Axe, I guess I could just like search for Rosis. Item Shades, Rosis' Summons, Rosis' Axe. Wait, it doesn't say anything about that at all. Usher of Death, Rosis, who shows the path to the catacombs throughout the lands between, is depicted on this ritual axe. The dead easily lose their way and have always been in sore need of a guiding hand, so let's look for the other Rosis stuff. Imp Shades, that doesn't really talk about it. Yeah, so the only thing is the unique skill of Rosis' summons, which says, raise the axe aloft to summon those lost in death. 3 skeletons will appear at a distance and attack in tandem before vanishing. So, this is a pretty minor mistake. Unfortunately, it does kind of have some unintended consequences, which can end up being misleading, because those lost in death may not actually be those who live in death. And we talked about this a little bit on the stream yesterday when we were watching Square Table Gaming's video about Rosis, and somebody had asked like, what's the difference? To me, those who live in death are the way that they are because they came into contact with Deathroot, and that is pretty explicitly canon as far as the skeletal militiaman description goes, I think. Let me look it up for you guys real quick. Yeah, this is the grotesque fate of those who come into contact with Deathroot. And then other descriptions about Deathroot talk about that's when those who live in death started appearing in the land. I don't remember verbatim what description that was, so apologize for that. But anyway, where's my chat? Okay. The real Elden Ring starts after the credits, and we have to go to YouTube for speculation. Yeah. You don't think Lost in Death is a proper noun? You think it's just a descriptor? Yeah. Okay.
In death comment, and mine did too. But before we get into that part, I want to talk about a certain bit at the beginning where it talks about how everyone needs help being ushered into the afterlife. Everyone needs a guiding hand at some point, and that's exactly what Rosis is. If you don't know, an usher is a person who helps you to your seat. For example, you could have an usher at your wedding who helps you to your seat and tends and helps people. That's exactly what Rosis does, only not at her wedding. Oh, maybe he did it at Marika's wedding, but, you know, we can't know that. Rosis uses his guiding hand to lead them to the catacombs where, in the normal age, they would have been reborn. But now we see them crouching outside of all these catacombs in agony, waiting to be reborn. Yet that reborn process that is so integral to these people's lives will never happen. For the shattering occurred, and we do not know what happened to Rosis. But we do know that Rosis' statues can be located outside of every single catacomb. It's something that you might have seen in, say, your first playthrough, when you're really in-depthly looking through everything. There was a guiding light, like the ghost flame, which followed you and led you to the catacombs. I could not replicate this for whatever reason, but in the first time, in my first playthrough when I was playing, and I found these statues, a blue light would shine up and lead me to the catacombs. For this.
So yeah, the blue lights are contingent on not clearing that catacomb. So if you go into the next New Game Plus cycle, you should be able to see them again, I think. Although it'd be really funny if it was just like, oh no, you cleared it in New Game 0 and now you're in New Game Plus 3. No light for you. But yeah, that's just kind of the mechanic for that. So somebody had said something else that I wanted to mention. Oh yeah. Morlor said that you thought Lost in Death is a proper noun, or you don't think it is a proper noun, it's just a descriptor. And then... oh yeah, Scowleasy said, Lost Souls would be equally effective and have less confusion in your opinion. So one of the issues with that, I think, just kind of comes down to translation. And to be fair, it's possible we could have like a Dusk-Eyed Queen versus Gloam-Eyed Queen situation on, where Lost in Death could mean those who live in death for all intents and purposes, but for whatever reason, they're just kind of referred to by different terminology, at least in the Japanese. And so the English localization is using kind of like the English equivalents to the Japanese there. So this isn't... I'll just say, like, the localizations by saying that they're lost in death is doing a faithful job to the Japanese text, I guess. Don't make fun of how somebody talks. I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit of a hypocrite to say that, because accents are funny. I don't know, it's just like the text makes it hard to read. The Lost Dead. Hey, Ulcerated, welcome in. Although a big part of Elden Ring seems to be showing that things that seem unique to the current order have actually been around a long time, so those who live in death might have been a thing long before Deathroot. Yeah, I think there's probably something similar to that going on, and I had more of a reason for thinking... oh, yeah. So, if you consider how the Helfin Steeple talks about the spirit world, it does show that spirits existed even at a time when like Destined Death was still around, which is kind of trippy to think about, because for many people they tend to believe that Destined Death must mean oblivion. But even if Destined Death does mean oblivion, one question that arises from that is, do all souls experience Destined Death when they die, when the Rune of Death is integrated into the Elden Ring? It doesn't seem likely if there was a time before the Erdtree that had a spirit world and an usher that took people there. Ulcerated headcanon is that the Japanese and the English version are two different words. So there's a little bit of ambiguity in your comments where you could be saying like both the Japanese and English don't match each other, or like that they're both sets have two different words. And so if you're talking about the latter, that is correct, that they're just kind of like lost in death. But you might have said that before I finished my point a moment ago. Chadwick says, if the Black Flame ghosts are to be understood as living death, are we just talking about the Deathbirds? So yeah, I guess like the Deathbirds could have been an actual those who live in death before those who live in death became a thing, because they're weak to Litany of Proper Death. But then them being weak to Litany of Proper Death could be a weird gameplay mechanic lore oversight. But I don't know. This is kind of a good thing to bring up. Each is its own reality. You meant worlds, not words. Oh, okay. Two different worlds. Okay, I must have just like dyslexia. My fault. Thanks. Perhaps death and death is not oblivion, but just going into the spirit world or being separated from your body. Well, one of the issues with that is the current states of both Ronnie and Godwin and the kind of assumed dichotomy that comes along with their current forms. So Ronnie is bodiless but has a soul. Godwin is soulless but has a body question mark that's not like entirely himself anymore. And so setting those two aside, let's say that Malekith killed all of the nameless demigods that are stuck within the wandering mausoleums. They're also described as soulless or slumbering demigods, which could imply that destined death, at the very least, is meant to destroy the spirit and perhaps other things as well, which makes it a bit more difficult to talk about in this regard. Drew Wang sees destined death just as a law that all things must die, and I think that would be more palatable to me if we didn't have that odd situation with Ronnie and Godwin springing up by Ronnie using a fragment of destined death to kill like both of them. And yeah, so there is also the potential that the full rune of death without the fragment stolen from it didn't necessarily like destroy the soul, but unfortunately we just have no idea of the mechanics of death and life and all that other good stuff and bad stuff before and during and after the time of the Erdtree. So it's pretty rough out here. Chadwick says, destined implies the end of entropy, the real non-cyclical death, escape from samsara into true oblivion, question mark. And maybe, but I don't necessarily, it's just a maybe. I don't necessarily think so, but I can't really articulate why. We'll all look like fools after the DLC. I mean, we already do, don't we? You think the Mausoleum demigods are the golden lineage that got on the Night of the Black Knives? Well, even if they got on the Night of the Black Knives, there's the supplementary material that says like Malekith like launched a counteroffensive and pretty much killed them all. Then we have the whole description that's kind of like botched in English where it says like the champions knew it was at stake when they fought Malekith. But the Japanese is a little bit clearer that they knew it was at stake and they fought him anyway, despite having fear in their hearts, and it's precisely because they knew fear that they were champions. So, yeah. The DLC would disprove everyone but me, says everybody.
This video today.
You need a source for that supplemental material. I believe it's a Miyazaki interview, but I don't remember exactly which one it is off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure it's listed somewhere in the resources on my Discord, but I couldn't tell you exactly which one off the top of my head, which I'm kind of repeating myself there, but I might try to remember to look at it later or whatever. Anyway.
On a new save, a new game cycle, I could not replicate this for whatever reason. Perhaps it was removed or I did not do something right, but I remember it being there, and if you do too, please let me know. I don't know if I'm going crazy. Now that we've talked about the purpose which Rosis serves, we need to talk about something else. What is Rosis? Well, we don't know. You might all be thinking, oh, well, it mentions those that live in death, so maybe it has something to do with Godwin. But I don't think this is to be the case, because the role of Rosis is to guide those who have died to the afterlife, to the catacombs, to be reborn. But because of those who live in death, they're perpetually stuck dead. So, in my eyes, perhaps these those who live in death that you summon with this axe are in fact those he's tried to guide, but he's like, hey, wait a minute, brother, what are you doing? How are you still here? That seems like the most logical explanation to me. Not to mention, when you actually summon these spirits, you do in fact see the flame of the ghost flame. Now, we've talked about the ghost flame multiple times, and as we've said multiple times, and I've said over the last year, there is a high chance, it's my biggest theory, that the ghost flame is going to be integral to the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. I know a lot of people as of late have started taking that theory on as well, but I have said it since the beginning, the ghost flame is going to be part of the DLC. I just know it. And I think there's no better person to help with that than Rosis, who seems to have this some kind of godly power over those who live in death. For even in the catacombs, we see those who live in death, the very, very same skeletons that we summon. And when they die, you can see the ghost flame flowing up from them. Perhaps those who live in death, are a bit special, imbued with the ghost flame, eternal servants of Rosis, the usherer of death. Now that we've talked about who Rosis might be aligned to, we need to actually talk about what Rosis is. Is he a demigod? Is he just some powerful ass motherfucker? Or is he a god in of himself? Well, we really don't know.
Right. So, sorry for making the ping noise while I was looking for things, but this doesn't say it exactly, so I'm pretty sure there's another thing that goes along with this, but I don't remember exactly. I just remembered the phrase coetaneous attack, but on the Elden Ring Bandai Namco site, it talks about the Night of the Black Knives, so begins the tale of the Shattering, a devastating war, blah blah blah. One grim night in the depths of winter, a flock of unknown assassins stole across the lands between. In a coetaneous attack, this foul covenant snuffed out the lives of many of the God Queen's kin throughout the Empire, too numerous and too scattered for her godly protection to save. So, maybe I might have been wrong. I'm thinking that it could have been Malekith that killed those demigods. Maybe they were part of the golden lineage that got by the Black Knife assassins. But either way, my point is they got due to destined death for all that we know. So, yeah. Okay. There might be more somewhere else, but I just don't remember exactly off the top of my head. You had canon that destined death is death from the old age when in the ring, but it's different when being channeled. Yeah, I don't know, just because, if age was part of it, one would think that, what's it called? The ancient dragon smithing stones would also be imbued with destined death specifically, because they have the power to warp time and could essentially unlock the stasis on the demigods, I guess, but technically, mechanically, they're different. It's yeah. Perhaps Ghost Flame is the original form of soul that predates the Elden Ring and Golden Order. Yeah, I don't know if you could call that Ghost Flame. Or hold on, let me rephrase that. I don't know if you're talking about Ghost Flame specifically, or the little types of flames that sprout out of those who live in death, but perhaps, another way to say it would be the souls that come out as a byproduct of Ghost Flame, burning the body and whatnot. And it is very fascinating to me that in all the catacombs we get spirit ashes, which implies cremation of a sort, when things are supposed to be going to the Erdtree in their bodies and whatnot. So I think it's possible that even after Erdtree burial was a thing, that people could have still kept burning the dead, and the goal of the Erdtree was to just absorb the lost souls into its roots, but that process got broken with the shattering and everything.
But I definitely believe he has some connection or some godly essence to him, due to the fact that his powers surpass that of any, apart from maybe Miquella's, that we know of. There's also something to mention when you actually look at the statues, which we haven't actually talked about yet. The ghost flame is found in that blue light. I have seen it. I can't find the video, but in this post-editing, if I do find the video, or a video of it, I will link it and I will put it on the screen right now for you. Not to mention, on his head he possesses a crown of thorns. Or roots, it could be either one. I'm thinking it may be more roots, considering we actually see roots wrapped around his statues. Now, when you think of roots, people are normally going to bring up Godwyn and his brood and his sort of powers of death, which would make sense when you think that, well, Rosis is an usherer of death.
Yeah, I don't have footage of the Rosis blue light either. I'll just need to take a mental note or just add it to my mental list of things to just get like footage of that I get to whenever the fancy strikes me. So I'll need to like go into a new game plus file or whatnot and look at one of these statues, which will be pretty easy to do. I've got a lot of save states. So Drew Wing thinks that there's something to the idea that all the outer gods are manifestations of individual laws/runes from the Elden Ring. Yeah, that's something I've wondered as well, because I don't know, like, if that were the case, I am curious, like, what was the anchor god? If not the greater will in whatnot, or what Morgoth's would have been, because his is different than Mohg's, and Mohg's would be more associated with the Formless Mother. But yeah, I'm not sure if there's a good one-to-one, but I've certainly wondered it before, and I've wondered whether or not the demigods are relics of previous ages, and like their status was kind of like covered up by the Golden Order and whatnot. But that's just like some super tinfoily stuff that I don't really entertain. Those are just like some of the idle thoughts that I've wondered about their strange connections to the runes that they actually have.
But I feel there is a lot more to Rosis than a loyal servant to Godwyn. Where on earth did the concept of death come from? It came from the Elden Ring. Who had it before Malekith? The Glowmide Queen. But who had it before the Glowmide Queen? We don't know. We physically do not know how the Glowmide Queen got a hold of destined death. I think Rosis is the biggest candidate for who could have had control over death before the Glowmide Queen. Who's to say that the concept of order that came down with the Elden Beast was the only concept of order that was around? If the Ghost Flame, which we know is to do with death, we know you can summon the Ghost Flame by burning the bones of your fellow kindreds. What if in a time before the Elden Ring, Rosis ruled with his power of the Ghost Flame, one that controlled death itself? What if then eventually the Glowmide Queen took this death and her demi-godly powers tainted the Ghost Flame, making it the black god-killing flame? Where has the Ghost Flame gone? We do not know. We do not get these answers, and that gives even more reason to believe he has something to do with the Elden Ring DLC. Both the Ghost Flame and the Black God-Killing Flame are very, very similar in appearance. They're both flames. The only difference, one is blue and he's cold, the other is black, which there's not much difference. It's just a colour palette.
To be fair, like, Ghost Flame can also deal frost buildup, at least on Help and Steeple. I don't think all of the ghost magic does it, or the hexes, I guess you call them. And I think that's a dual scaling between Int and Faith, whereas Black Flame stuff is pure Faith and deals physical damage, whereas Destined Death actually deals holy damage. So it seems like the holy component of Black Flame got lost, which might also pertain to how Ghost Flame is dual scaling. I don't know. There's this weird trichotomy between Ghost Flame, Black Flame, and Destined Death that's extremely annoying to try to unravel, because when Godwyn dies, we get essentially the curse mark that is modeled on the kind of full wheel centipede of the Ghost Flame hexes, but technically speaking, one would almost assume that there should be no real direct connection between Destined Death and Ghost Flame. Maybe Ghost Flame is what you get when you burn a body with Destined Death and like ghosts come into it. I don't know. But if that were the case, it doesn't really match up with how the Fallen Hawks are inadvertently using Ghost Flame when they burn the bodies of their comrades. So maybe that is meant to call into question when Destined Death really like became removed from the Lands Between, and that's like a whole other can of worms that I regret opening ever so slightly here. So the other comment that I wanted to make in relation to what he was saying a moment ago, and I just wanted to help contextualize some of his points here, which he has like a very clearly specified is speculation based on the type of language that he's using, which I respect. But yeah, a lot of what he says will be seemingly contradictory to a lot of people's understanding of the lore if they believe the Crucible of Life is like a primordial soup from which all life came and is contingent on the Golden Star entering the Lands Between. However, that idea isn't technically ever made explicit, and I would argue that the Crucible of Life is not a primordial soup, and it is actually clearly the Erdtree based on multiple descriptions which describe it as such, as well as the Siluria tree spear being modeled on the Crucible and being modeled on a tree, although others feel as though that is just a form of the Crucible, and so we could just kind of wag the dog all day long by like chasing the tail, essentially. So anyway. Ghost Flame, the white flame that's the color of violet. Unfortunately, as far as the Japanese description for that description goes, it doesn't say that it's actually the hue of Ghost Flame. It just says it's the flower of Ghost Flame. I really wish that it was the hue of Ghost Flame, especially since in 1.0, Malekith did use purple violet flames in his Destined Death based attacks. So that could have been a relic of earlier dev processes that could have gotten walked back or changed as their visual effects changed on things. I don't know. So I really wish that that description was consistent with the English and Japanese, because it would give me reason to think that something happened to Ghost Flame to change its color. But as we have things now, I just have to rub my hands and shrug. Captini says, how Black Flame's effect could be understood as it removes max health. It's not trying to kill you, but it completely removes your life. Alright, more lore. Colors seem to change over time as the laws of the world change. Yes, I agree with that. So, alright, to try to reiterate what I said about the Crucible, maybe I need to pull out the good old trusty MS Paint. Let's do this. All right, but let's keep the video up a little bit in the background. So we've got the Crucible of Life. Let's do this. I'm trying way too hard to make straight lines. Oh no, it's crooked. Anyway, so damn it. Double damn it. So some people think that the Crucible is a primordial ooze from which all life came due to the greater will bringing the the star into the Lands Between. And from this star and the Elden Beast, we got our primordial soup, because it's red, from which all other life came, like dragons and whatnot. And then they've got like extra legs and feet and extra wings, because these are ancient dragons. So this is one interpretation of events, but that isn't explicit within the text, and everything else that talks about the Crucible talks about it being tree-shaped, kind of like the Erdtree, based off of Siluria's spear and whatnot. And then this one's ever so like slightly reddish tinged and whatnot. So, yeah. So this is what I would say that the Crucible actually is. This is the Erdtree, and I would go so far as to say that it's the Erdtree during the time of Godfrey, because everything that talks about the Crucible in some regard is related to the time of Godfrey, either directly or indirectly. So, for instance, all of the Crucible incantations say that they stem from the ancient Erdtree, and if that's the case, it should also be noted that the Elden Stars description is the oldest Erdtree incantation. So it shows that there's something which predates the Crucible, which isn't like the biggest of deals, but I don't know. Anyway. And so, okay. I think after the time of Godfrey, or like whenever Destined Death got removed, the red of the tree also could have gotten removed. And so now we have a more yellowy golden Erdtree that has like a little bit of orange here and there, but it's not nearly as red hued as before. And this is what we get with Radagon. So, is the Crucible ooze? Not exactly. The Siluria tree tells us it was based off of a tree, and that tree is pretty clearly the Erdtree for multiple reasons. So hopefully that's clearer for you guys. No, I do not mean the Great Tree.
Palette change, which I think is because the Glowmite Queen tainted the Ghost Flame, which brought this whole new section in. Hey, how do we even know if it's the full truth that the Elden Ring was originally part of the Elden Ring and came down with the Elden Beast? It might not have even been part of it originally. We know.
So a lot of people are going to also have issue with that statement, but to be fair to this interpretation here, the description for Elden Stars is written as hearsay, so that could just be a prevalent belief of where the Elden Ring came from, or maybe not even like a prevalent belief. It could just be a random belief, or not so random, but it doesn't actually give us the full story, which I know a lot of people are going to be upset to even question that, because I know a lot of people are really hellbent against the idea of hearsay in FromSoft games actually representing hearsay rather than legitimate facts about the world.
That Marika took away death for the demigods and the gods. This was part of something she did while messing with the Elden Ring to achieve immortality. Marika the Eternal, so on and so on. Who's to say this isn't a lie? Who's to say the Greater Will even put death into the Elden Ring? We simply cannot know. Which, again, feels like it's hinting at something in the DLC. I know we had it with Sekiro. There were so many things that could have been talked about in a DLC, but the DLC never came. So this could be a situation like that. But I'm crossing my fingers and my toes to hope that there is some more info on this, and maybe we can see the truth. This is all without talking about the unknown insignia that is found on the bottom of the statue.
That's a pretty cool visual transition right there. I want to look at that again. So Morlord said, am I saying that the Crucible is the Elden Lord in the Age of the Erdtree? I honestly can't tell if you're just shitposting, especially through text, but no. I would say that there is no Elden Lord before the Erdtree, and that the Crucible is the Erdtree. Like, Godfrey's Erdtree is the Crucible. There is no pre-Erdtree time that is referred to as the Crucible. It's just a pre-Erdtree time. So Crucible is specifically Godfrey's Erdtree, because that's where life gets blended together.
This is all without talking about the unknown insignia that is found on the bottom of this statue. Now, this might be a little bit far-fetched or a bit bonkers. I know some of you have called me a bit of a nutter, and, you know, I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult, but regardless of that, the bottom, the insignia, it looks like a piece of wheat that's been strung around with rope or something, that's bundled together. which is quite a coincidence, seems though a very similar looking wheat is also found in the DLC image trailer teaser.
Okay.
The ghost flame seems to mimic the Erdtree and its effects on the world. Shadow of the Erdtree.
Yeah, part of me is really reluctant to read that heavily into some of the visual design of things like the statues, because a lot of these things are just reused assets from Dark Souls 3 and whatnot. I know the little shields that appear on the statues was in Dark Souls 3. Let me see if I have a good picture of it offhand. Statue. I've got a lot of pictures of statues, actually. Maybe too many pictures. I'll need to refine my search. So I don't know. It's not that one. I don't know if this works. Okay, nope, that's a different one. Actually, this is kind of a good example, even if this isn't the one that I was originally working with. So, this design on the quote-unquote Sword Saint statue right down here also appears in Bloodborne, literally in technically two locations, both of which are in the lecture hall. This is above the doors that like head out towards the nightmare, but they also have some like weird pseudo elven looking script in Bloodborne, so like you could just ignore what's in the middle in Bloodborne. But like the two infants with like this weird shawl that drapes between them is just like a reused asset, and that's something they do quite a lot. Oh yeah, and then here's like another one. I know Charlemagne and the Virgin of Paris are Mary are reused from Bloodborne, and they make an appearance again in Elden Ring. So this is Charlemagne or Charles the Great, and then Mary with little baby Jesus who's holding an orb or a ball which represents the earth and his dominion over it. And that is in Fair Missoula, but it's also randomly on Raya Lucaria. And so it does make me more skeptical to tie a lot of these areas together when they just seem to be generic assets as far as like FromSoft is concerned at times. And actually, I think the spires in Fair Missoula might be the same in some parts of Raya Lucaria. But anyway, that's like not too important right now. You thought those are a version of a fleur-de-lis? Yeah, maybe. I was wondering that, but I don't know the actual terminology for it, so I was trying to avoid it. Yeah, and I'm not saying because it's reused it doesn't have meaning, but I'm saying the way that it's being reused is kind of sapping it of its meaning. So, for example, I think the Chloranthy style design, which appears in the Erdtree Sanctuary in Fair Missoula and in the Consumed King's Garden in Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring and whatnot, is literally meant to represent the idea of royalty, because it's very similar to the chrysanthemum Kike crest of Japan, which represents the emperor. Hold on, let's go ahead and pull that up. Or wait, what's it called? Imperial sigil. Kiku, not Kike. I'm an idiot sometimes. Okay, so the Imperial Seal of Japan is this thing, and it looks a lot like the Chloranthy thing from Dark Souls 3, but I'll show you guys some references in Elden Ring. So you got like this right there, which is on like all the high roads and whatnot. And this one's in Fair Missoula. We got that ancient dragon over there. So I do think that there can be significance to some of the visual imagery which is used throughout these games, but I am very skeptical because quite often it just seems to be generic and not actually placed all that intentionally, despite how you may feel about that.
Just a theory, but I think it's really highly likely that this is the case, and there seems to be a lot gunning for it. Maybe the weak bit's a bit far-fetched, but I would not be surprised considering From Software is even more bonkers than I can be. Sadly everyone, that is the end of the video. I really hope you did enjoy. If you did enjoy, please consider leaving a like and subscribe, as it truly and greatly helps the channel in more ways than one. If you are liking this style of content, then please let me know down below, as it also lets me know that you are enjoying this style of content and want to see more just like it. Anyways, I won't hold you any longer. May you find your worth in the waking world. Goodbye everyone.
All right, the Bloodborne reference at the end. All right, Ask Next, you have a good night, and thanks for dropping in as always. Take care. All right, so that was the secret character of Elden Ring's DLC by the Emerald Gecko. Now, honestly, I really kind of hate all of the speculation videos about the DLC because they're literally working with nothing but trying to spin them in such a way that there's more there. And so I'm not going to like the video, even though I think some of the content is pretty good. I do think Rosis is interesting, but just trying to tie it to the DLC feels very forced to me, and I feel like Rosis is deserving of his own video, which it seems as though the Emerald Gecko was agreeing with towards the beginning of the video. So yeah, I'll just leave it there for now. So let me see what else they have in their catalog, because I still might subscribe to them. No, yeah, okay. I really don't like a lot of the videos where I have no idea what's going on between the thumbnail and the title. It just feels too clickbaity for me. So, okay. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and move into the next video of the night with Miquella, the Rebis child of Radagon and Marika, and The Point of It All by Ontos.
Hello everyone, in this video I'll attempt to definitively explain how Miquella is the favorite son of Radagon and Marika, showing how both of them tried to raise Miquella the best they could and loved him more so than the other demigods. So much so, in fact, Miquella is the very reason Marika shattered the Elden Ring for after Godwyn's death. I'm sure Shadow of the Erdtree will back me up when it releases sometime 2024.
Bold claims already. Are we even sure it's going to release in 2024? Oh no, have I planted that seed of doubt in your guys' mind? Yeah. So, hey Arculus, welcome into the stream. Yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm glad to have you drop by. And even if you can't make it live, I definitely appreciate, watching the VODs and everything. So thank you.
Seriously, I hope this DLC releases before Elden Ring 2 comes out. Miyazaki is trying to suffocate Miquella in his cocoon, I tell you. If we want to understand Miquella, we need to start the exploration with accurately understanding his upbringing, which is summarized by 3 words: Golden Order Fundamentalism. See, in the real world, fundamentalism is the tendency among certain groups and individuals, usually religious people, that is characterized by the application of strict, literal interpretations to scriptures, dogmas, or ideologies, along with a strong belief in the importance of distinguishing one's in-group and out-group, self and other, which leads to an emphasis on the conception of purity and a desire to return to a previous ideal from which advocates believe members have strayed from.
So I'm curious where all of these symbols are coming from, especially because this one's just water. But I know this one is oh man, why am I blanking on the name of it? But anyway, I just won't say the wrong thing. I'll stop it there. So yeah, I'm curious where some of these are from. This one's obviously Judaism. I don't know what this explosion looking like thing. This one's Christianity. This is water. This is Buddhism or Sanskrit, Hinduism. One of the origins. Anyway, Taoism. I have no idea what this is. It looks really cool though. No idea. This kind of looks like a pig nose, and this one's like a stop, almost with a third eye in the hand. But yeah, I don't know. Oh, and then this is Dharma. So this one's Buddhism. So is this Hinduism? Anyway. Do you feel like it's from CK2 religion maps? What is CK2? Only pure osmosis for the water fundamentalists? Okay.
Term is usually used in the context of religion to indicate an unwavering attachment to a set of irreducible beliefs, the fundamentals. Now, in Elden Ring, fundamentalism does not have these connotations. What is being referred to as Golden Order fundamentalism has nothing to do with dogmatism or religion. In fact, as the lore makes it clear, it is the exact opposite. Fundamentalism is scholarship in all but name, scales incantation using both intelligence and faith. Golden Order fundamentalism, pioneered by Radagon, has more in common with the philosopher Goldmask than the religious zealots of the world. Both Radagon and Goldmask actually have a profound and deep understanding of not only the Golden Order, but mathematics, nonduality, spirituality, systems thinking, and metaphysics. Their passion is the pursuit of understanding the Golden Order at its most primitive and essential level. Golden Order is the current representation of the Elden Ring, and understanding that deeply will provide the kinks in the armor of Marika's designs, which was apparent for both Goldmask and Radagon. After all, Goldmask was awestruck by the revelation that pierced the truth of the Golden Order, whereas Radagon, up until the final stretch, was adamant in mending the Elden Ring.
So yeah, I agree with a lot of what he's saying right here, with these two characters kind of being similar, and it is really fascinating to me how scholarship or intellectualism essentially becomes converted into like faith under the Golden Order. And I don't remember exactly how the Japanese words it, but it's like a little bit stronger than what we have in the English here, where like scholarship is meant like in terms of intellect, and it makes it more directly related to faith. But anyway, that's like not too important. Just one of those things that stood out to me. And then it's from Crusader Kings. Okay. Or perhaps the icons are from Civ 6. Okay.
Now, before we go further, let's step back a bit and remember the definition of the Elden Ring. This definition has been partly created with the laws of causality and the regression spells, which are the core tenets of the Golden Order fundamentalism. But what exactly do these spells refer to? When you read their descriptions, they appear nebulous and more of a word salad for the uninitiated. However, make no mistake, what is described in these two spells can take hours to fully unpack. First, let's start understanding the law of causality deeply. The fundamentalists describe the Golden Order through the powers of regression and causality. Causality is the pull between the meanings, that which links all things in a chain of relation. This principle of causality can be defined as the interconnectedness of all phenomena. All phenomena in the universe exist within the context of mutually supportive relationships, what Buddhism refers to as dependent origination. Now, this idea is reinforced within the very scientific method, referring to how all things are linked in a non-linear and unpredictable chain of causation.
Yeah, and this is kind of also the groundwork which goes on to describe karma. So, while I have an idea of it, it's kind of really difficult for me to try to articulate it in a way that does it justice. So, unfortunately, I will either refer you to like the rest of this video or maybe Wikipedia or like some other sites. Like if you're actually curious about this, the term used for causality, if I'm remembering correctly, I would need to double check, is the same term that the Japanese use for karma, because that's kind of what it means. Although the idea of karma here in the West makes it a little bit less clear because I think we tend to think of it as like a how do I describe this, like a points system where you have like good karma or bad karma. Well, that's kind of true, but like what that actually means is somebody's actions has caused the world to become like a better place, and so you can have good karma by doing things that are going to be good for you and for others, because that's just like the type of connections that you're creating throughout the world, which will kind of emanate throughout the world and make it a better place overall. Whereas like bad karma is the byproduct of living, I don't want to say like an unfulfilling life, but I think you guys know what I'm trying to get at. Like when you're just kind of like living off the rails and you have like a lot of bad karma, like your life goes to shit because you're living a shit life, you know? So that's kind of like all of that is related to your actions, and that's kind of where the idea of karma comes from. It's not like a moral judgment like we would kind of associate with the idea of sin in the West. It's just more of a factual kind of understanding of doing good creates good in the world, so do good, versus doing bad creates bad in the world, so don't do bad. That's kind of what karma was originally meant to get at. Although I think like the way that those ideas got transmitted to the West is that they got coupled with like the ideas of like reincarnation and like fixing all that stuff because of your karma. So it makes it sound as though like karma is more associated with sin and that kind of system rather than like causality. But yeah, okay. Hey, El Degusto, welcome to the chat. So this is Ontos or Ontos or something else. I don't know how to pronounce his name. So yeah, we watched one of his videos the other day. I did not like it because I didn't understand that it wasn't a lore video. It was more about like the mechanics of the Crucible Knight. So this one, I figured we could try to like make it up to him by going into more lore. And this is pretty good so far.
Not a linear causation as in A causes B and B causes C. That's a misconception. The law of causality is non-linear and unpredictable. All parts of a whole are essential, and tinkering with even the smallest of events, however inconsequential it may look, will break the interconnectedness of all phenomena and will result in an impossibility. In order to keep things practical, I want to illustrate my point with a down-to-earth example, something that all of us can relate to. I want you to try to imagine how you would never be born if your mother didn't decide to go to that coffee shop that day, Thursday morning, accidentally hit your father, spill the coffee all over his shirt, and promise to make it up to him with a coffee date the next day. You were born because your mother and father has met just in the right time, just in the right circumstances, and in the exact way they did for you to be born. If even the smallest of details were to even change microscopically, you would not be born. Imagine your mother tripping up on the street 5 minutes prior to the coffee shop, and how this slight delay would profoundly change the series of events. Since she lost a few seconds by tripping up, now she needs to wait for the red light to go off in traffic, which costs her a few more minutes, and by the time your mother grabs some coffee, your father would already be on the highway back to work. They have never collided, and they have never met, so you would never have been born. Just because your mother tripped up on the street for a few seconds, that microscopic change had erased you from existence. This is called the butterfly effect, a profound idea that is described by an analogy. When a butterfly in Hong Kong flaps its wings, a tornado appears in Colorado, showing how even the smallest and most inconsequential and separate-looking events and actions are inseparably connected to everything else. This is the law of causality taught by Radagon to Miquella. The idea that, whether good or bad, all things matter and should be valued as a holistic system, as parts of a greater whole, not trying to shun an aspect of reality as bad and abandoning it for this reason, just because it is different. That idea,
which is kind of interesting because, at the very least, the so-called adherents of the Golden Order treat the misbegotten and whatnot with disdain, and arguably Marika herself did that, so I'm not entirely sure that I'm on board with this aspect of his explanation for causality and like respecting everything, because the Golden Order wasn't exactly benevolent to those who are not within the upper echelons of that order, as evidenced by the misbegotten being slaves or second-class citizens, the treatments of the Alban Orcs by like the Cuckoo Knights, and the Omens. Yeah, so what more really needs to be said?
is inherently flawed from this perspective. Life includes death. Death includes life. They can't be separated. Systems thinking is an underlying philosophy that investigates how profoundly parts contribute to the whole.
Yeah, I'm a little bit curious where he's going to go with this, because the whole establishment of the Golden Order means removing death from life, so that kind of like breaks the system right there.
At its deepest application, it provides an insight into the perfect nature of reality, as described by Buddhism, promoting value systems like empathy, objectivity, unconditional love, equanimity, and wisdom. This already provides a certain lens we can view Miquella in, but this is just the beginning. Now, let's continue our exploration with the law of regression. The fundamentalists describe the Golden Order through the powers of regression and causality. Regression is the pull of the meaning, that all things yearn eternally to converge. What is being referred to exactly by the phrase, all things yearn eternally to converge? What a peculiar way to phrase things, right? Doesn't mean Radagon is trying to teach Miquella that going back to the basics is the way, or something like, the end is the beginning. Although not bad inferences, the law of regression is the very definition of non-duality, a spiritual path that emphasizes the absence of fundamental duality or separation in existence. This experience directly questions the boundaries conventionally imposed between self and other, mind and body, observer and observed, that pervades our everyday perception of reality. Now, in Elden Ring, Hyetta makes it clear in her dialogue.
Alright, so there, I think like what he said here is interesting. However, I'm not sure that actually follows based on what he said. He just said that the law of regression represents non-duality, but he doesn't justify why this is the case. So, yeah, that's just kind of a strike here, unless he goes on to elaborate further. I think this is something to keep note of.
Now, in Elden Ring, Hyetta makes it clear in her dialogue. All that there is came from the one great. Then came fractures, births, and souls. But the greater will made a mistake. Torment, despair, affliction, every sin, every curse. Everyone born of the mistake. And so what was borrowed must be returned. Melt it all away with the yellow chaos flame, until all is one again. I'm not saying Frenzy Flame is the epitome of wisdom and non-duality per se. Well, yes and no. There is a bit of both in Hyetta's description. My point is this origin story is important to understand deeply, as it illustrates how a tendency exists in a reality that's been separated from its source, desiring to become one again, going back to the source, not as in going backwards, but in completing the circle of life, regressing and progressing towards the most fundamental aspect of existence, to embody the non-dual source that is intrinsic to all living things. Crucible era of the Erdtree is a good example to understand this. This is a manifestation of the Erdtree's primal vital energies, an aspect of the primordial crucible where all life was once blended together. This is a description of what that primordial essence is, and this is the consequent perversion of its divine qualities by Marika's Golden Order. A vestige of the crucible of primordial life, born partially of de-evolution, it was considered a signifier of the divine in ancient times, but is now increasingly disdained as an impurity as civilization has advanced. Both Radagon and Goldmask would surely object to this partial de-evolution, as Marika's propaganda would put it. The law of regression is the very embodiment of this worldview.
Hold on, let me re-listen to that part of the sentence again.
Object to this partial de-evolution, as Marika's propaganda would put it. The law object to this partial Both Radagon and Goldmask would surely object to this partial de-evolution, as Marika's propaganda would put it. The law.
So he is saying that Radagon and Goldmask disapprove of this, I think.
To this partial de-evolution, as Marika's propaganda would put it. The law of regression is the very embodiment of this worldview. The understanding of non-duality Radagon leaves Miquella with, the wisdom that pervades the essence of existence and even the Golden Order. As Hayata put it, when Greater Will made a mistake and fractures appeared from the One Great, even those fractures, those mistakes, if you will, are still imbued by the non-dual source and its holism within its metaphysics.
So yeah, these are like a lot of unsubstantiated claims that I'm kind of coming more and more to like have outright disagreements with. So, how to approach this right here? I think this is taking a very particular view of Radagon and the Golden Order, which I feel is just kind of contradicted by the rest of the game in the way that the Misbegotten and the Albinorics and the Omen are actually treated. So I don't know how Ontos feels about like the actual Omen and when they were locked underground versus when at least Morgott and or Moog were released, if they were released or if they broke out. So I'm curious what he would like say about that idea in general. But nonetheless, like all of the other adherents of the Golden Order do kind of disdain and look down on these folk. And so one of the ways I don't necessarily like want to insert my headcanon right here because that might not be the most like relevant bit right now. But yeah, hold on. Yeah, I think I just like want to rewatch a couple minutes and then like maybe talk about it. Yeah. That could be a character's profile pic in an older Fire Emblem game of Hayata. Yeah, it was a pretty good picture. Arcalis thinks that he means that the fundamentalists would disagree with Marika's classification of the Crucible as de-evolution, but it's hard to tell. Yeah, that's like one of the ones where I think it could be interpreted a couple different ways. So I'm not entirely sure what to make of that point just yet, which that's kind of why I want to like revisit this before I like talk about some of my thoughts, or if I do at all.
A vestige of the crucible of primordial life, born partially of de-evolution, it was considered a signifier of the divine in ancient times, but is now increasingly disdained as an impurity as civilization has advanced. Both Radagon and Goldmask would surely object to this partial de-evolution, as Marika's propaganda would put it. The law of regression is the very embodiment of this.
So maybe he's saying that he disagrees, or sorry, let me rephrase it. He may be saying that Radagon and or Goldmask would disagree that it's de-evolution, maybe? Yeah, is Arcalis saying? I can potentially see that, so maybe this is like a wording issue.
Worldview. The understanding of non-duality Radagon leaves Miquella with. The wisdom that pervades the essence of existence and even the Golden Order. As Hayata put it, when Greater Will made a mistake and fractures appeared from the One Great, even those fractures, those mistakes, if you will, are still imbued by the non-dual source and its holism within its metaphysics. At this point, I hope I made a solid foundation for what Golden Order fundamentalism represents, as a profound understanding of existence, if you will.
So yeah, my disagreements so far are that I don't feel he's made enough support to substantiate the law of regression being implicitly non-dual in nature. And even if it is non-dual, I don't necessarily think that tracks with trying to proclaim that Radagon inadvertently trying to proclaim that like Radagon is kind of like more benevolent than he actually seems to be in the game, I think is problematic for me, because if Radagon was really all this understanding, it doesn't make much sense to me that his followers of the Golden Order and whatnot would be some real jerks towards all of these folks. And yeah. So part of my pause right now is like thinking about if Radagon, when Radagon would have like attained this kind of enlightenment that he passes on to Miquella, and why only Miquella, like why not the Carian children as well? And of course this might lead into our friend's opening points that Miquella was like the favorite child, and so he got like all the special attention because he's the youngest, I'm assuming. But like yeah, setting that stuff aside, all of the other demigods are kind of jerks, although they could have been tainted by the power of the Elden Ring after the shattering, as it's said. And so yeah, I don't know. Some of the other stuff about like the de-evolution is a little bit difficult for me to talk about because I don't exactly know what Ontos or Ontos is arguing, but yeah, maybe I'll leave that alone for now, and I might revisit it if it doesn't get brought back up again. Right, so, okay.
What Golden Order fundamentalism represents, as a profound understanding of existence, if you will.
Yeah, Scowleys says America's propaganda claims that the Crucible is de-evolution, which he claims Radagon and Miquella would disagree with. And so, yeah, I think trying to say that that's America propaganda is kind of difficult to interact with because it's written as a verbatim thing in the game, but it is kind of also representing a belief. So let me double check it. De-evolution. Devolution. It's one of those weird words. It was considered a signifier of the divine in ancient times, but is now increasingly disdained as an impurity. So, yeah. So, the part of it being born partially of devolution, that is not written as hearsay and is not like part of the considerations. So, I'm kind of reticent to say whether or not that part is propaganda, and I intended to disagree with that. Yeah, even in the Japanese, it's very clearly not speculation. So that's just like a fact that it is like devolution. Has an ancient holiness, but with the later of civilization, it became considered impure, Kegare, and all that stuff. Anyway, okay. Yeah, I know the Misbegotten looked evolved, but I don't necessarily agree whether or not Radagon and Goldmask would say that they're not devolved. I think the issue isn't necessarily that they consider it devolution as much as it is like that's still technically part of the order, and that's how I would envision Goldmask would look at those types of creatures because they exist within the order. That must mean they're part of the order because like the order is absolute. It is reality itself, and that reality is based off of a form of logic or order. So all right, going back to the video now.
In fact, as a father and son, Radagon and Miquella had a back and forth relationship where they were talking about these ideas and concepts, gifting each other spells and incantations. Amidst all this, there was this one thing in Miquella's mind, bothering him, his sister Melania's sickness. See, Golden Order fundamentalism is very profound in its principles. However, it can't miraculously cure diseases. It doesn't have the answers to all the world's problems, nor is it even designed to be. You don't go to a mathematician and philosopher when you have a toothache. That's what dentists are for. Similarly, Miquella, with the foundation of Golden Order fundamentalism under his belt, decides to pursue a different avenue to cure his sister Melania of her curse of inevitable decay. As the lore goes, and yet the young Miquella abandoned fundamentalism, for it could do nothing to treat Melania's accursed rot. This was the beginning of unalloyed gold. I want you to not misinterpret what is being referred to here. Make no mistake, Miquella is utilizing his existing knowledge and experience gained via fundamentalism to start a potentially new medicinal path with unalloyed gold, turning what is theoretical into practical. I want to now take a break and flip the script back on its head and talk about Miquella's relationship to Marika. But to understand this dynamic, we need to explore what the Age of Plenty represents. It was once thought that the blessed sap of the Erdtree would drip from its boughs forever, but that Age of Plenty swiftly came to a close, and with time, the Erdtree became more of an object of faith. This is an extremely important item description to understand for multiple reasons. Age of Plenty is presumably the period shortly after Marika's Golden Order has started and the Rune of Death was sealed in Malekith. As you can...
So, yeah, that part, I don't blame him for having this issue because of the way that the English is written. It makes it sound as though sealing Destined Death is the same as the time it was removed or plucked from the Elden Ring, but that actually is not the case here. So for those who may not be too familiar with that, as far as what I'm talking about is concerned, let's go ahead and pull up the things we have. What's it called? Death Prince. So the Mending Rune of the Death Prince, as well as Nia's dialogue, the little finger reader crone in the Round Table Hold, kind of talk about this in two different formats. So the Mending Rune of the Death Prince says, the Golden Order was created by confining Destined Death. Thus, this new order will be one of death restored. So by saying that Destined Death was confined, that makes it sound like it's synonymous with sealing Destined Death, which is totally understandable why people would come to that conclusion. Unfortunately here, as far as it's talked about in the Japanese, we've got Tori no Zoku, which means like, to like pluck it out, which is I think how Nia talks about it. So to remove, to deinstall, to take away, to set apart. So the Golden Order essentially began by the removal of Destined Death. So removing Destined Death is technically different than sealing it. even though they can sound like the same thing. Rune of Death? I don't remember, like... I don't remember exactly how Ania phrases it, so I'm going to need to do the search. Rune of Death is unbound. Okay, here we go. Ania says, the Rune of Death goes by two names. The other is Destined Death. The Forbidden Shadow plucked from the Golden Order upon its creation. Oh, no, that makes it... Oh, okay, I never even realized this. So this makes it sound as though, like, the Rune of Death was in the Golden Order. But anyway, that's not too important. The Japanese is a little bit more direct and says, like, at the beginning of the Golden Order... it was taken out, and then it's the sealed shadow. So, as far as we know, like, the shadow is sealed now, but the important thing is that the Rune of Death used to be in the Elden Ring, and then it was removed and later sealed. So this sealing is one of the more contentious parts of the lore, and I should honestly make a video about this, because I know this is such a big... point of contention for a lot of people, because Malekith could have taken the Rune of Death and sealed it within his blade, but that blade wasn't necessarily inside Malekith himself. So there's this kind of weird ambiguity where there's 2 points in time where Destined Death could have been quote-unquote sealed. So we first hear that, like, Malekith kind of encounters Destined Death, or like he defeats the Glowmide Queen and the power of Black Flame, gets sealed away, and like the Black Flame is related to Destined Death, and so that's like its own topic that I don't want to touch right now. So setting like the Glowmide Queen stuff aside, Malekith gets his hands on the Rune of Death, and then we don't exactly know when he seals it, but he is said to have like put it in his blade. The issue is, on the Knight of Black Knives, it's required that the Rune of Death have already been removed from the ring and sealed within his blade, but the blade was not necessarily sealed within Malekith himself, because Ranni needed to steal it from the blade. So after Ranni steals a fragment of the Rune of Death from his blade, Malekith like freaks out, and he's like, oh no, somebody was able to steal part of the Rune of Death from my sword, so... how do I stop this from happening again? I will then seal this sword that contains Destined Death, or the Rune of Death, within myself, so that it may not be stolen again, which is pretty much what he talks about when you fight him. He's like, I will not have it stolen again. So that's why he like unbinds it when he transitions into phase 2 to face us. So why did I even go on that tangent? I'll need to remember. Let me look back at the video. Oh, right. So, the overall point that I'm making is sealing Destined Death is not the same as removing it, and that impacts when the Golden Order begins. So, let me back up a little bit on his video right here, and then I'll go into it a bit more again.
But that age of plenty swiftly came to a close, and with time, the Erdtree became more of an object of faith. This is an extremely important item description to understand for multiple reasons. Age of Plenty is presumably the period shortly after Marika's Golden Order is started, and the Rune of Death was sealed in Malekith.
Right. So this is kind of one of the points of ambiguity which Arcalis was just asking about in the chat. So Arcalis says, so it's like the English translation skips that period of Destined Death being removed, but not yet sealed. Yes. And so, as I was saying a moment ago, it's unclear even with like the Japanese side of things, like whether or not removing Destined Death means it got sealed in the blade, because that could count, or whether or not sealing within the blade isn't like fully sealing Destined Death, and whether or not it's the blade being put into Malekith that counts as the real sealing, which I think sounds more likely based off of some of the other text in the game with Malekith putting it within himself. I would need to look at the actual descriptions because I don't think I remember it off the top of my head exactly. Let me look up Malekith real quick, and then I can like discover it with you guys. So I don't need the dialogue. This isn't going to talk about that. All right. Okay, but after the defeat by Malekith, the Black Blade, the source of their power was sealed away. Yeah. So it's unclear whether or not the Rune of Death was removed from the Elden Ring when he fought or defeated the Glomide Queen. So that's like another thing to try to consider. Malekith's Black Blade. Okay, so after a fragment of death was stolen on that fateful night, Malekith bound the blade within his own flesh such that none might ever rob death again. So this could be the point in which destined death is technically sealed, but there is also that ambiguity with the Godskin stuff, which is worth considering. Oh yeah, and okay, so the terminology used in the Japanese uses the same fujita, which means to seal, whereas like this is just bound in English, which isn't like that big a deal as far as like the actual localization goes. The only reason I bring this up is because there's a bit more consistency in the Japanese text in the terms in the terminology used here versus the English. So yeah, it's really annoying when that happens, and I'm not like blaming the localizers. I'm saying it's annoying because it's annoying for me personally to try to talk about this to other people who don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah, I guess this doesn't really talk about it. I wonder. Okay, yeah, I guess the English has it the same way. I guess I never really thought about it. It says, like, this blade was once imbued with destined death. I guess that implies that it is no longer. Okay, yeah, it's pretty fine. When Malekith sealed destined death, the true power of the Black Blade was lost. Okay, yeah, that's the same. Oh yeah, this is one of the things that I was actually wondering very, very recently because I hadn't thought about it in this light. So this is going to be a little bit of a mind screw in that it can really it can force like a reconceptualization of some things which might have been taken for granted, but if sealing destined death or the blade within himself is what happens after the night of the black knives, could the power of the God Slayer's black flames have still been active up until that point? So in other words, was black flame still powerful before Godwyn died and not necessarily immediately after the Glomide Queen? Maybe. I might want to like double check that other description with the Godskins. After their defeat by Malekith. So this makes it sound as though like it's more of a immediate thing, but I guess it is still technically vague. Wait. Oh yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I don't know. Okay. Drew Wing says, it seems like no matter what, Marika is removing the Rune of Death from the Elden Ring for the purpose of changing the laws governing the world. Yes. Like, plucking is more important than sealing. Yeah, that's kind of one of the points that I wanted to make about this, because it's kind of important to, like, understanding the contextualization behind, like, sealing Destined Death versus removing it. And not that that's like the most important thing, because most people are going to intuit that the Rune of Death implies that it's like a great rune, like a mending rune or something like that, and so is most likely part of the Elden Ring. But part of the reason why I think this is important is because of the way that affects the timeline and whatnot. And this is going to be controversial, and I have a lot of reasons for believing in this, but there's also a lot of reasons to not necessarily see it the way that I do. But I don't believe that the Rune of Death was actually removed from the Elden Ring until after the Age of Godfrey. And I think the quote-unquote Golden Order actually starts with Radagon inserting his Elden Ring and whatnot into his Elden Rune with the cross lattice features into the Elden Ring after the Age of Godfrey. And so I believe the Crucible is the Age of Godfrey and the Age of Plenty, because I think these are the exact same thing, and that the Erdtree Sigil is technically the same age, but the Crucible effect was like dying because the tree was still subject to destined death. And so I think, kind of similarly to Gwyn, Marika realized that her age was coming to an end, and she freaked out, and she looked for a way to link the flame, and she chose Radagon and stole the Karyans' lunar magic to bind fate in the night sky to stop fated or destined death. But that's a lot to talk about right now, so I'll just kind of leave that maybe a little bit alone for now, and I'll probably talk a bit more about what he's bringing up right here, because of the video, which I can't remember his point. Too much going on in my head. Okay.
As you can see, the capital is
let me
filled
back
with...
up like 15 seconds again. Oops.
To understand for multiple reasons. Age of Plenty is presumably the period shortly after Marika's Golden Order has started and the Rune of Death was sealed in Malekith.
Right, and so the reason why I went through that whole tangent right there is because I think it is arguable when the Golden Order starts, and I think the Age of Plenty technically predates that, and this is going to be a point of contention, mostly on my part, because I recognize that most people don't feel the same way that I do about the lore here.
As you can see, the capital is filled with bowls to contain the dripping sap from the trunk of the Erdtree. This Erdtree sap has divine properties revered by the people of the capital. Even to this day, in its former glory,
I was muted through all of that, wasn't I? Okay, so Scowleezy said, Radagon discovered you could halt the Karyans' fate by stopping the stars, and then Marika used that idea to try it on a global scale. And then I said, yes, pretty much those are kind of exactly my thoughts on the matter. There's probably a little bit more nuance to go into right there, but that's the general gist of things.
Served a fundamental purpose. In fact, we see Marika delivering the sap of the Erdtree in a bowl to baptize the people. But to what end? What exactly does the sap do? What would be the point of baptizing people? Well, the answer is shocking. In fact, in some ways, it is so simple that you probably missed it. The entire game, the truth has been foreshadowed, yet you didn't realize it. Each time you open a doorway to the boss in an underground dungeon in Elden Ring, the truth of the Erdtree burials and the reincarnation of the people was facing you. Do you see the people in its roots being buried, and then actual humans spring forth from the leaves of the tree? Do you see all of those unabsorbed corpses lying at the roots of the Erdtree undergrounds? Unabsorbed due to the Deathroot curse infesting the Erdtree's roots thanks to Godwyn's abomination. This is the profound truth of the Age of Plenty. At these times, people were baptized from the Erdtree's bough and had Erdtree burials to be reborn from its leaves. Just as the first cutscene puts it, the fallen leaves tell a story. The story of the life-reinforcing and death-denying order of Marika. The Age of Plenty came to an end after some time. The Erdtree no longer shared its blessings, and when the collected sap of the Golden Order slowly but surely depleted. The people couldn't have Erdtree burials anymore, as the blessing sap was what allowed for people to be reincarnated in the first place.
So Drew Wing says you really can't get down with people being literally born from the tree. I felt that way for a very, very long time, and a large part of me still does feel that way. So the mental gymnastics that I did to kind of actually make it legitimately make more sense to me was that the idea of Erdtree rebirth could explain how the tarnished just up and pops out of the ground next to a side of grace. So maybe they don't come from the boughs of the Erdtree. But anyway, yeah. So I was originally going to let the comment slide, but I don't necessarily think the depictions on the catacomb doors are literal. And the way that I tend to view these bodies and whatnot is that their spiritual juices get sucked into the Erdtree, which becomes sap, because juice becomes sap, and then that sap becomes amber, which becomes the tears that fall from the Erdtree and the minor Erdtrees. So I think essentially the crystallized tears that we can use in our flasks are materia that comes from the life stream of Elden Ring's dead souls. Arcala says, knowing this is the game where the two fingers are literally fingers, you'd imagine people were literally born from the Erdtree. Fair point, fair point.
Meaning, post-Age of Plenty, people were living their lives like a zombie, all rotten, extremely long lives that just doesn't end. The bones and skin decaying, but life somehow persisting. After all,
So I'm really curious that if he makes the connection that after the Age of Plenty, life becomes elongated, would that not imply that death is more or less part of the order during that Age of Abundance? I think I said Age of the Erdtree earlier. I meant Age of Abundance. I should say Age of Plenty, because that's a lot easier for me to mentally distinguish from Age of Ancients, which sometimes I inadvertently say. Anyway. Yeah, like Final Fantasy VII, people don't pop out of the ground. It's more metaphysical. Yeah, so the way that I view the Erdtree is that it's like a gigantic filter on the lands between, and that's kind of how I also reconcile the idea of the Crucible blending all life together. So if you think about a literal filter on your sink or a faucet or something, if you have the water running through the filter, you can redirect the flow, and you could definitely say that it is the source of all your water if all of your water comes from that filtered water. So it's a little bit of an exercise in, mental gymnastics, but I think you can stick the landing, so to speak. You think we're on the same page? Okay. Yeah, okay.
decaying, but life somehow persisting. After all, the rune of death is sealed in Marika's reign, meaning all demigods are eternal. Grace is given to its subjects, the golden hue in their eyes, the immortality of the tarnished. Post-Age of Plenty, people may not be dying per se, but the usefulness, energy, zenith for life in Marika's subjects are slowly waning away as decades go by. Without the Erdtree reincarnations, former productive members of society are living their lives as bunch of corpses. This unfortunate turn of events is described in the Minor Erdtree Church by Marika herself. I declare mine intent to search the depths of the Golden Order. Through understanding of the proper way our faith, our grace is increased. Those blissful early days of blind belief are long past. My comrades, why must you falter? This is an extremely important location in Elden Ring with an important quote from Marika that describes what is happening here. Let's unpack this with those blissful early days of blind belief are long past. Now, what is being meant by this phrase? I think it's obvious now since we've laid down the foundation. Those days are referring to the end of Age of Plenty, where the sap was dripping from Erdtree's trunk, blessing the people of Marika, fueling the Erdtree burials and reincarnations. But those days are long past now, so Marika is declaring her intent to find a solution to this problem. And as people's faith in the order is waning, Marika is trying to keep spirits high by the phrase, "My comrades, why must you falter?" When we enter this church, we find the Golden Order seal representing Golden Order fundamentalism, the very topic we've just explored in depth. Now you might ask, what is this Golden Order seal got to do with anything Marika is saying here in this church? Weren't you the one who said Marika was opposed to this scholarship pursuit and Radagon was the one who pioneered it? That's exactly right. This situation is unprecedented to say the least. Marika must have a very good reason to do this, to say these words, because tables have turned now. She is in a dire need of a solution to her living corpse's problem. Erdtree needs to regain its reincarnation abilities, and if the Golden Order fundamentalism has the solution, then so be it. However, what exactly was the solution that twisted Marika's arm and got her on board with fundamentalism? As you can see, this minor Erdtree is different. Typically, the minor Erdtrees are vertical, while only this one is wobbly and disjointed. On top of that, there is this golden hue to this tree where the others have a brown trunk. What?
No, I never really noticed that it is kind of wobbly. That might be important because it could potentially represent a... how do I phrase it? Like a non-dual dualism. So what the hell does that mean? As far as other depictions of trees and whatnot go, let's go ahead and pull up an image of something interesting here. So this is the crossed tree tower shield, and this depicts a singular tree that's all wobbly and like circles in on itself, kind of like the Halig tree, and there's kind of a flame at the bottom, which might be telling. But anyway, if this is supposed to be evocative of that kind of crossed tree design, would this be a tree that has both portions merged into one, so it doesn't like actually end up wrapping around itself, so it's just one on its own, aka a representation of Marika as Radagon, or vice versa? I think that's one possible way you could read that, if this truly is a kind of unique wavy pattern. But then I guess I wonder why this one is straight, other than like the whole like dualism and whatnot. But anyway, I do have a lot more to say, but that's just kind of one thing that I could touch on briefly right here.
What might be the reason for this? Marika previously said to search the depths of the Golden Order, so I decided to follow her lead and entered in the nearby sealed tunnel, hoping to go down deeper to explore what is happening with this Golden Erdtree. After hitting an invincible wall, I made my way down, killing some enemies. Finally, I've arrived at a location that seemed like a dead end. I was seeing that golden hue in the tree trunks, but I feel like I could still go down, and if this was the end, this would be too anticlimactic. I was going to search the depths of the Golden Order after all. So, I hit my weapon and find another invincible wall. I make my way down even deeper, and finally I arrive at the source of the golden hue of the minor Erdtree up above. The Lord Alabaster, guarding a golden meteor. Great sword forged from the golden-hued meteoric ore. The blade conceals gravity-manipulating magic. A weapon unique to the Onyx Lords, a race of ancients with skins of stone who were said to have risen to life when a meteor struck long ago. That exact meteor resides right here, and I realized that then and there the golden hue I observed in the minor Erdtree up above was sourced by the golden meteor this Alabaster Lord was protecting.
Honestly, that's an idea that I haven't heard before. It's interesting, but I don't necessarily think that works entirely because like these kind of meteors are found all over the places, and there aren't like a bunch of gold vegetation surrounding where the meteorites have struck other parts of the lands between. So I'm a little bit skeptical of that. But I think in general, if you want to believe that the Elden Beast was brought upon a similar meteor and then could have infused the lands with gold, I could see where this idea would have a bit more merit to you.
All along, the minor Erdtree Church was an experimentation ground for Miquella and Marika to imbue unalloyed gold into the Erdtree so that it can perform its reincarnation function without the need of its Erdtree sap and baptism practices utilized in the Age of Plenty. See, once I've realized this realization has blown my mind. Since Miquella has pioneered unalloyed gold, it is safe to assume Minor Erdtree Church was an experiment done with Marika and Miquella to find a solution to this reincarnation problem that has been plaguing the Golden Order ever since the Age of Plenty.
Alright, so I think he's made some critical errors here that need to be addressed, but I'm trying to see if, in his viewpoint, there isn't a contradiction. So, hold on. Maybe this doesn't contradict in his mind so far, but yeah, it's a little bit difficult trying to keep track of his timeline of events with this church specifically, because this church in particular is maybe the most arguable like point of individual interpretation in the entire game in terms of what it represents and what it symbolizes and the repercussions of those thoughts surrounding what it could symbolize and whatnot. So, to speak a little bit less vaguely there, I really didn't want to bring this up, but one big issue with the Minor Erdtree Church and the Minor Erdtrees in general is that some people believe that the Minor Erdtrees are all products of the Golden Seeds, which are predicated on existing or flying out of the Erdtree after the Shattering. So some people take that to mean that these trees could only possibly grow after the Shattering had already happened, which conflicts with a lot of this stuff going on in this theory. I don't personally believe that the Minor Erdtrees are products of Golden Seeds, and I think they're more likely connected to the roots of the Erdtree, and they're kind of like Pando, where they're all one organism that kind of like keeps cloning itself, and once the Shattering happens, the Erdtree gets disconnected from its roots, and then all of the Minor Erdtrees are left to fend for themselves, which I think is why the Minor Erdtrees are literally and metaphorically headless, because they are disconnected from the head Erdtree. But okay, setting all that stuff aside, as far as what he's presented us in this video specifically, I'm not 100% sure this is a contradiction, but it should be, I would argue, is that if Marika is first declaring her intent to study the Golden Order through Radagon and whatnot here, that would very easily predate the whole like Miquella stuff. And then this Erdtree also shouldn't be a byproduct of Miquella's research into unalloyed gold, because that would have come way later in the timeline from when she made this proclamation. So he might be trying to say that Marika had this proclamation and then years on down the line worked with Miquella to like make this tree, but if so, like, then why would Miquella also abandon this tree to like go make his Halig tree? This whole argument right here does not make a lot of sense to me right now. And then Arcalis says he says the sap no longer coming out of the Erdtree, sorry, no longer coming out stop the reincarnation, but wouldn't the sap be the reincarnation material itself, similar to the amber / glintstone? I believe so, and I do have a lot to talk about that, but I was also trying to like let him make his point before I went into that stuff, because what I do have to say about that doesn't directly connect into what he was talking about, and I didn't want to just like completely derail his theory and make it harder to track than I've already done with all of my pausing so far. So hopefully I remember to go back to that towards the end of the video, and if I don't, please bring it back up.
See, normally, minor Erdtrees have found their ways in the lands between after the shattering of the Elden Ring. When the Elden Ring was shattered, these seeds flew from the Erdtree, scattering across the various lands. Yet, there are 3 mini Erdtrees specifically planted in the location of the minor Erdtree church, not just one Erdtree like all the rest. These are not the seeds from the shattering event. It is too closely targeting a narrow location, unlike other minor Erdtrees. Instead, this is a former experimentation ground for Marika and Miquella to unearth the potential of unalloyed gold.
So I feel like these claims right here are unsubstantiated, and I feel like despite that, one could still argue that these are just part of like one larger organism that we don't see like the full picture of. But even if they were 3 separate trees, it's a little bit unclear if they're like planted exactly the way that he's implying so far.
For bringing reincarnation back to the lands between. The experiment of directly ingesting unalloyed gold within the Erdtree roots. After this breakthrough, it is not hard to see why Miquella is the favorite son of Marika and Radagon.
So, the beginning of unalloyed gold is when he moves away from fundamentalism because he realizes it can't help Millennia, which means that he is kind of already divorced himself from Radagon and his ideals. So I don't necessarily find the reading of Miquella and Radagon becoming, or having like Miquella become the more favored child after this event. It just does not ring true to me for like a lot of small reasons that are kind of hard to quantify. And I think I had something else that I wanted to bring up with that, but I need to back up the video a little bit.
Miquella potential of unalloyed gold for bringing reincarnation back to
Okay, now I remember. So I'm very, very curious why he thinks that this tree in particular is imbued with unalloyed gold, because if he's relying on its visuals alone, the depiction of the Erdtree in the icon shield is almost identical to the kind of depiction of this minor Erdtree, with the exception that the icon shield is like a much larger tree, relatively speaking.
The lands between. The experiment of directly ingesting unalloyed gold within the Erdtree roots. After this breakthrough, it is not hard to see why Miquella is the favorite son of Marika and Radagon.
So yeah, if he did inject unalloyed gold into this one's roots, then why did he choose to water the Halig tree with his blood? Is that just a byproduct in allowing the unalloyed gold to form? I feel like this inadvertently raises more questions than it answers.
Miquella is taking the core of Golden Order fundamentalism and giving a practical spin on its principles by unalloyed gold. Miquella is like this practical, down-to-earth, yet philosophical and rigorous balance of Radagon and Marika, containing the elements of masculinity within the feminine, just as the alchemical Rebis child should. Speaking of alchemical Rebis child that is Miquella, let's remember the idea we've explored in the previous video, the alchemical lore of the Rebis. In alchemy, the divine pursuit is to combine the sun and the moon to create the Philosopher's Stone, the true gold, the unalloyed gold. And both Marika and Radagon did create this perfect Rebis child. Seemingly everything was on track for the true Empyrean to ascend the throne.
Alright, without horns, you have a good night.
However, there was something very wrong with Miquella. Both Miquella and Malenia are twins born with curses. While Miquella is cursed with eternal youth, Malenia is cursed with eternal decay. As you can observe, Miquella is frail, young, and weak physically. Mohg has stolen him post-shattering, and this fact gives such sorrow and sadness in Marika that even Gideon feels the need to address it. So the Erdtree, now but a husk. I heard speculation Miquella embedded himself in the Erdtree, but before he could finish, someone cut the tree open and absconded with his infant form. Indeed, it seems those words held weight. How vexing that the all-knowing didn't have the full story. Perhaps the Queen's sorrow was justified. My apologies. Lost myself for a moment there. Perhaps the Queen's sorrow was justified indeed. Mohg has stolen the true Empyrean of the unalloyed gold, and now the throne of the Empyrean lineage is left in a power vacuum. See, Ranni has rebelled against the greater will. Malenia is on the brink of losing her mind, and Miquella is stolen by Mohg. Marika feared this would happen. She knew the moment Ranni has shed her Empyrean flesh and rebelled against the greater will by killing Godwyn, not just Erdtree but her Golden Order would eventually die if she succeeded in her vision. Ranni should be stopped. But the question is how? How exactly? Miquella in his infant form couldn't hope to oppose Ranni in this state, and Melina can only carry Miquella so far. Marika needed a plan. Something to bolster Miquella, something to lend him strength so that he could oppose Ranni, who had shed her Empyrean flesh to bring the Age of Stars. Shattering of the Elden Ring. I propose Marika already did have plans for shattering the Elden Ring before Godwyn's death. So shattering of the Elden Ring didn't happen on a whim or as an emotional reaction. Marika planned Elden Ring's shattering already. However, what happened with Godwyn is that his death forced Marika to speed up her plans, as Ranni is now a direct threat to her realm and demigods. Post-shattering, if Miquella were to claim a shard of the Elden Ring, in spite of his curse, with the newfound strength of the shards, it might tip the scales just enough for Miquella to oppose and best Ranni as the true Empyrean of the Golden Order. Giving Radagon's and Marika's beloved Rebis child, Miquella, his greatest chance at ascending the throne.
So yeah, I have a lot of disagreements with this, where in many ways it seems that Marika was more complicit with Ranni's plot than this current video lets on. I don't really want to go like too far down that rabbit hole though, because I think even within the constraints of this video, that saying Miquella was favored by both Marika and Radagon to become the next Empyrean Lord or whatnot doesn't really work out too well, because we're told that Miquella abandoned fundamentalism, so how could he represent the Golden Order if he has denied it, you know? So maybe like the phrasing could have been a bit better, so like maybe Marika is moving away from the Golden Order to something more perfect with Miquella, but then that kind of stuff also goes into some of the questions I had about why did Miquella infuse only one minor Erdtree with unalloyed gold, but then seemingly did something different with the Erdtree. So like a lot of this stuff just is not quite adding up for me, unfortunately. Doesn't it seem wrong to ignore Melanio in claiming that Miquella is the Rebis child? Wouldn't it be both of the twins as a split Rebis child? And yeah, that's another point that could be brought up. The funny thing is, like, I have like so many little issues that like the bigger ones like that just kind of feel like further down the road in terms of giving them consideration. Drew Wang says, you don't get all the plotting around an act that Marika could have done at any time. So to be fair, at least for this explanation here, he says that killing Godwin was a catalyst that sped up Marika's plans, but we don't exactly know how or why. So, yeah. And even with all that stuff put aside, there's a lot of really weird supposed Megamind stuff going on with Marika tarnishing the tarnished, so that way they could potentially come back to enact her vision, question mark. Yeah. Absquatulating with the child? Absconding. He's saving the little Muppet from this miserable ring. Okay. And so, oh yeah, with the Healing Tree stuff, Scowleezy said a bit more seriously a moment ago that maybe he watered it with his blood to make it grow faster, and maybe if the tree is attuned to him, it'll make it more effective at changing his body or something. So one of the reasons why the whole Healing Tree and the unalloyed gold thing does kind of bother me is because it seems like for unalloyed gold to be unalloyed gold, it needs to not be mixed with other things. And so I feel like Miquella's blood would be sullying the purity of that unalloyed gold, and it wouldn't necessarily have the same effect as I think it should. But of course, that is just speculation on my part. Absquatulate? Oh, it's an actual word? Okay, it's a stupid word, but it's a word. I'm gonna need to Google that.
By shattering the Elden Ring. The Elden Ring, that is the very interconnectedness of all phenomena, and the unified order of power that can ultimately be Miquella's last chance. Hello everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video. I've spent so many hours preparing this, and if you can show some support by liking, commenting, and subscribing to the channel, I would most appreciate it. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
So this is one of those videos where I have a lot of issues with it, but I think despite all of those issues, I actually do legitimately like it because it offers a lot of extra food for thought that I hadn't considered before, or it like brought new perspectives to the table, which is quite refreshing in some other ways. So I am going to unironically like the video, and I'm going to share it with you guys if you would like to do the same. And I did have a lot to say about things related to the Age of Plenty in the Erdtree, and then there was something else. Who said it? Was it about the reincarnation? Yeah, probably. Yeah, I guess that stuff kind of all ties together. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and back up the video a little bit, and I guess we're not going to get to the paradox of Godrick the Grafted tonight, unfortunately. Right. So yeah, I still don't understand his point here. I mean,
a good example to understand this. This is a manifestation of the Erdtree's primal vital energies, an aspect of the primordial crucible where all life was once blended together.
All right. So the whole thing with the Age of Ancients, and the Crucible and whatnot, I think becomes important when they get recontextualized to be... Did I say Age of Ancients again? The Age of Abundance, Age of Plenty, and the Crucible, I think, should be linked up together. And I think once that happens, a lot of disparate elements of the lore really start falling in place a lot more neatly than might be expected. The consequence of that is kind of unlearning what you may have already learned and trying to get rid of the baggage that came before. And that can be a bit of an arduous process, I understand, because for the first couple months of the game, I also thought that the Crucible was kind of akin to a primordial soup. Do I still have my MS Paint? Yeah. So I thought the Crucible was kind of more akin to a primordial soup from which the Beastmen and the dragons, maybe not the dragons, but at least the Beastmen and all the other like little life forms of the lands between came from. But once I looked at the Japanese description of the Crucible Knight set, it said, kind of oddly enough, that I think it's the arms specifically. Oh no, that's different thing. Okay, so um, there's a couple descriptions which kind of like make this a hell of a lot harder to get to into English. So um, the Crucible Axe set says it holds the power of the Crucible of Life, the primordial form of the Erdtree. So, for what it's worth, it doesn't call it the primordial form of the Erdtree in the Japanese, and it's a very odd phrasing in general. So we have Gensho no Ogonju, which is Gensho is like the original or the source. So the no particle here is like adjectivizing this noun into making it an adnominal, which means like a noun that modifies another noun. So we've got Ogonju. Ogon means gold, and then Ju is tree. And so you've got the original golden tree. So the original Erdtree houses the not primordial, but like the power of life's crucible, essentially. And it strengthens crucible incantations. So that's a lot of word salad right now. So to say this in a more palatable manner, the Crucible Axe armor contains the power of the Crucible of Life, the original Erdtree, is one way to say it. And then this armor strengthens Crucible aspect incantations. So, if the Crucible is the original Erdtree, what does that mean? It's not necessarily the original form, it's actually the original Erdtree. If it was just this description on its own, I'd be like, well, okay, maybe it's still a primordial ooze, we don't necessarily know. But Siluria's tree, come on. Alright, nope, that's the will. So Siluria's tree says, the primordial form of the Erdtree is close in nature to life itself, and this spear modeled on its crucible is imbued with ancient holy essence. So, damn it, there's a lot more to talk about this than I was thinking. The primordial form, again, primordial form doesn't exactly exist in the Japanese, but the point that I want to make clear is that the spear is modeled on the crucible, which is consistent in the Japanese there. So this description does make it sound like a little bit more vague. So it's like the Erdtree's origins are closer to life. So that doesn't actually give us a lot of information on its own, and this can make it sound as though like it's compatible with the primordial soup description. But the second part of the paragraph, which says that the spear which is modeled on that which is the crucible contains an ancient holiness. So according to the Crucible Knight armor set, the Crucible is the original Erdtree, and according to Siluria's tree, the Crucible is shaped like a tree, which is what this tree is, or the spear is modeled on. So those are like two kind of direct supporting statements to suggest that the Crucible was a tree and not necessarily a thing which predates the tree, although it doesn't entirely discount that idea, to be fair. So this whole idea of ancient holiness does become more important, and I think you could tie that into like the red tinted color of the Crucible Knight's armor sets. And this idea is kind of directly referenced in the Gilded Great Shield, which has a completely different description in English from the Japanese. And this description in English is precisely why I thought the Crucible was initially a primordial soup, but it's wrong. So As far as the localization goes, it says the red tinge is in the gold coat mirrors the primordial matter that became the Erdtree, the color of homeward yearning. Because it says it's primordial matter that became the Erdtree, this makes it sound as though the Erdtree wasn't always the Erdtree. So what does the Japanese say? It says that this coating is close to the origins of the Erdtree and possesses a red tint, red like flavoring essentially. And that is the color of like reminiscence, nostalgia. Okay, yeah. So, the Gilded Great Shield in the Japanese completely discounts something else becoming the Erdtree. It just talks about the origins of the Erdtree and is vague beyond that. The important thing is, because this doesn't support this reading, it makes the Crucible Knight and Siluria tree descriptions stand more independently from all this stuff right here. So, going back to the stuff in the video, we've got the Crucible Sigil, which is represented by an Erdtree, the Crucible Knights who followed Godfrey during the Age of Plenty, and all this other Crucible stuff being associated with Godfrey and ancient holiness, primordial energy. All of that stuff is kind of associated with Godfrey because of things like the Amber Amulet. Amber Amulet? Talisman? Probably. Cerulean will be faster. Nope, not that Cerulean. Cerulean Amber Medallion. Okay, that's what it is. So the Erdtree's old sap becomes amber, treasured as the most precious of jewels in the Age of Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. A primordial life energy resides inside. So as I was saying earlier in the stream, I think the little bodies at the bases of the Erdtree roots in the catacombs and whatnot are getting sucked into the roots, becoming part of the spiritual sap within them, and then as they ripen, the sap becomes amber, which becomes a precious jewel. I think the Japanese here uses the character for dew, essentially, a droplet, and that is the exact same as the tear. So it becomes, wait, how does it say it? So amber becomes ancient tears, or the Erdtree's ancient tears, or is the ancient Erdtree's ancient tears. Droplets, whatever. So if we look up that kanji, we get the Viridian Amber, but that's not too important. So we get that showing up in the Crimson Seed Talisman, the Blessed Dew Talisman, which is more directly like related to the crystallized tears. And in general, it says for the Crimson and Cerulean Seed Talismans that the Erdtree was once perfect and eternal, and thus it was believed that Erdtree seeds could not exist. I do think this is a perfectly valid description, although I don't think it's talking about the Erdtree during the time of the Age of Plenty, and I would argue that this is most likely talking about the time of Radagon, when the Golden Order and his order binds fate in the night sky and removes death. So once death is gone, the Erdtree becomes perfect and eternal, and I think that is kind of contradicted, sort of, but not exactly, by such as all life. Course of all life. So, Erdtree Heal and Blessing of the Erdtree say, the Erdtree once flourished with abundance, yet it was only for a fleeting moment, such as the course of all life. So because it compares the Erdtree to all life, this suggests to me that there was a time when the Erdtree was subject to aging and death, and that got changed later on, and I think that's when it became eternal. So just to circle back to the whole Shizuku thing, we've got the larval tears. That's not what I'm talking about. Maybe I went too far. Oh yeah, about the Flask of Wondrous Physic. You can find crystal tears at the bases of the minor Erdtrees, blah blah blah. This will, okay. So right here, where's my kanji? I'm blind. Okay, so crystal tears. So that's where we get the tears from, and that's related to amber and sap. And sorry, I'm like kind of speeding along here. I do want to like get back to what you guys are saying in chat, but there's a lot to go over. So all of the crystal tiers use the same kanji, which is associated with the amber medallions. It's kind of like my main point here. And so all of that is related to Godfrey, and just to circle back to the cerulean amber medallion and whatnot. The reason that's important is because all of these medallions talk about having primordial life energy residing within them. And my argument is that this primordial life is equivalent to the type of primordial life talked about in all of the Crucible stuff. So I guess I could like look it up in Japanese for you guys. Genshi Tekina? Maybe it'll work. Maybe not. It's gotta finish indexing. Okay, I didn't think that would, but if we just use Genshi, it should be fine. Okay, maybe not. So it looks like primordial is more of like a English thing, but the idea is consistent. Crucible scale. Okay, so what do they call them? Where's primordial coming from? Crucible of primordial life. Gensho. Oh, okay, so to be fair, like Genshi and Gensho are kind of similar, but you know, different kanji for whatever reason. So, the Crucible has primordial life. Gensho. Should have remembered that. Versus Genshi life versus primordial. Anyway, so that's not too important. All of the Crucible stuff talks about it like that. I'm just trying to double check to see if this shows up in any other context. Fire's deadly sin. That's not going to be it. Dragon King Cragblade, Cellular Erdtree, Albinor Shield, Gilded Great Shield. So here is like one of the weirder connections that is going to be harder to like actually make them connect. The Godskins themselves are related, not like literally related, are implied to have some kind of weird connection to the Crucible. Maybe not like directly, but like they are compared. There we go. The Godskins are compared to the Crucible here, and it talks about the Erdtree in its primordial form, but that's not what it says, as I'm sure you guys are like picking up by now. What do they call it? Okay, so in the final line, it says that the Godskin's inhuman parts right here, their inhuman aspects are similar to the Crucible, the Erdtree's origin, essentially. So this one on its own doesn't tell us a lot, but it's really when you get all of the context together. So Godskins related to the Crucible, question mark, all of that stuff related to Godfrey, question mark. The Crucible Knights themselves are very directly related to Godfrey because they serve Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. And then maybe there's another case that we can build off of here. Crucible Scales. No. Okay, so that's pretty much it with that. But if we go back to that idea of holy essence or ancient holiness, that actually comes up quite a lot. Okay, cool. Golden sunflowers. Okay, so the thing that I talked about with the Crucible stuff, primordial gold said to be close in nature to life itself. So that's kind of like one of the bigger things. And then the Siluria tree and the Ordovis Greatsword talk about being imbued with ancient holy essence right here. That ancient holiness is like in the blade. And this whole idea of holy essence shows up in other contexts. So we saw the sunflowers like a moment ago, but this also kind of, I think, is meant to work with the tree sentinel armor and whatnot. So, okay, not holy grease, that's not it. Golden sunflowers. At the foot of the Erdtree, they retain their color along with powerful holy essence. So holy essence is associated with the Erdtree, but I think the golden sunflower is a bit different because it's like separated from that. But then, interestingly enough, we have the tarnished golden sunflower, which says, though wilted and faded, it still retains holy essence. So I don't think it's a coincidence that these are called tarnished golden sunflowers, and the terminology is consistent in the Japanese, where you have irase to represent, like, to fade, to become tarnished. And so, yeah. Ancient holiness associated with the tarnished golden sunflowers, and the actual tarnished are associated with Godfrey. So we've got Sacred Order. No, that's a different thing. Okay. And the Great Club. Oh yeah, the Great Club does talk about it with that, but not exactly in the way that I need right now. Crucible Horn Shield, that's where it appears again. So, Ancient Blessing, maybe? Anyway, I'm going to go to the Sentinel armor real quick. Golden Halberd, used by the Tree Sentinels, talks about... Nope, it'll be their armor. This is the malformed set. Okay. So the Tree Sentinels say they serve the Erdtree. Very few are permitted to wear the... Okay, wrong one. Okay. Imposingly sturdy and nigh unbreakable, the grace of old yet lingers. So this is very fascinating to me because even in the Japanese, it has like a kind of similar phrasing here where it talks about like grace of like the past, long past. Which implies to me that the grace of now is different, and there's a lot to kind of go along with that, with the removal of Destined Death and Black Flame losing its power. When did all of this stuff happen? Well, why is there such a break in between the things that are associated with Godfrey? Because the Tree Sentinels use like Erdtree worship stuff and whatnot, and you need the Tree Sentinels to exist before the war against the dragons, which is potentially before Radagon's time, but we don't really know. It could be after, it could be contemporaneous. Anyway, my point is the Tree Sentinels are definitely Godfrey. We've got this old grace and all of this other stuff, which connects with Godfrey and the Crucible and the red in lightning and the red in the hue of the Erdtree. I actually didn't talk about that. So, while I was talking about like the differences in the Japanese of the Gilded Great Shield, I didn't emphasize that the red tinge mirrors the actual origin of the Erdtree. So there's something going on in all of this time relating to Godfrey and the Crucible that is different than now. So that leads me to believe that all of this stuff and the great grace and blessing of old, I think, could be related to a time when Destined Death was still active in the world, because the Erdtree was once like all other forms of life, and now it's no longer, because I think Radagon changed things with either removing Destined Death or using the moon to halt the fate in the night skies. Maybe the two are related. If so, I don't know exactly how, but there just seems to be a lot of coincidence between all of that stuff to make a verb out of a noun. How funny would it have been if I went on that massive spiel and I was just muted? Alright. So, hopefully all of that stuff was kind of understandable. I know I just shotgunned a lot, and I want to make a proper video about all that, but obviously that's a very difficult thing to talk about because I have to like jump around so many topics. I need to set up and establish so many like differences between the English and the Japanese and why they're significant that I just haven't gotten around to doing it yet. And also trying to make it flow naturally and stay coherent and like kind of build to like the bigger points and whatnot. So if you guys have any questions real quick, go ahead and let me have them. Drew Wing asks, if all life was once blended in the Crucible, did Marika pair off reincarnation for every creature besides humanity? That's a good question. I don't necessarily think so, at least not initially. And I think that's probably why the Omen appear the way that they do. It's because they were infused with all forms of life, and they kind of became cursed by having an excess amount of life infused within them. But with that being said, I don't actually have a good idea or good mental gymnastic headcanon as to explain why the Omen and Misbegotten are so different, or all of that other stuff. Hey, Murder Your Memory, welcome into the stream. Yeah, you're pretty late to the stream. I usually end around like 20 minutes ago, but I've been on a tangent here that I needed to finish. Siluria's spear does look like a primitive tree, yeah. Silurian and Ordovician periods, indeed. It literally was the primitive Erdtree. In other words, the Crucible evolved into the Erdtree. So I would disagree with the phrasing there, that I don't think the Crucible evolved into the Erdtree. From all of the terminology that's used, the Erdtree was the Crucible. There is no reference to a Crucible that predates the Erdtree, but we do have other things which are said to predate the Erdtree, which don't necessarily seem to be Crucible influenced, such as the Deathrite birds. There's also arguably people like Marika and Godfrey. Marika, I think, is an exception because she's a Newman and she could be like a space alien for all we know. But we don't know anything about the origins of Godfrey and or any other humans that would have been active during his time. So like the Flame Guardians are technically tarnished and they should have been around really shortly after or during the war against the Fire Giants, but they're all like humanoid and whatnot. So yeah. You think they're different trees for different ages. So yeah, just to build off of what El Gusto said there, I should probably reiterate or at least emphasize the point that the way that I view the Crucible is that it's more specifically Godfrey's form of the Erdtree, and what we have now is the remnants of Radagon's form of the Erdtree. So during Godfrey's period, I think it was taking all life and fusing it together to a degree, and that's why it became the Crucible, because it was like melding everything together. Whereas in Godfrey's time, they had a bit of regression, so that way all of the wildness of the Crucible was regressed away from people and they became more standardized and more human. And then that also goes hand in hand with the kind of stasis. So what had once been a mortal Erdtree became perfect and eternal because of Radagon's doings with the law of regression and causality, in my opinion. What is the meaning of life? 42. But I don't think that's a good question. Chadwick says, were they selectively bred into the Erdtree? Or I'm not entirely sure how you're leading that. The Crucible existed as an entity alone before being tainted by the Greater Will and Golden Order. Even that much I would disagree with. I would say that the Crucible is the Erdtree. So there is no Crucible before the Erdtree. The Crucible is the Erdtree, just by a different name. If that makes more sense. Yeah, and so this right here is more on the side of speculation and more like tinfoil headcanon territory than anything else, Arcalis. But you said the tree mirrored Godfrey bringing all life together under America's reign, and you put bringing in quotes, which I think is a smart thing to do, and to elaborate on that idea for anybody who may not be catching on there. If Godfrey is like the quote-unquote god of the battlefield, or like the lord of the battlefield, I think he's called. He's going around and killing everybody. And what does that do for a tree that thrives on death? It probably makes it grow. And this is one of the most interesting descriptions to me in the entire game. And I actually always forget which description it is specifically. So, how's it phrased? I know it's not Blessing of the Erdtree, but it's something near it. In opposition. Okay, here we go. Protection of the Erdtree. I was close. Oh, I'm doing better. No wonder why I couldn't find my spreadsheet. It was over here. So, according to Protection of the Erdtree, it says, In the beginning, everything was in opposition to the Erdtree, but through countless victories in war, it became the embodiment of order. So this is super interesting to me because this makes it very clear that the Elden Ring didn't necessarily control as much as the current adherents of the Golden Order let on, and that things had to be forcibly brought into the Order, which means through death and Godfrey's conquest, which is kind of corroborated in like the Lowlanders rune and whatnot. Actually, the Lowlanders rune might be cut content, so maybe it's the Lands Between rune now. But anyway, yeah. The cycle of reincarnation was just Godfrey murdering everything. Yeah, that's kind of my speculative headcanon for now. And before the sap stopped coming because Godfrey stopped killing, well, what happened once he met his last worthy foe? His eyes got tarnished, and he eventually got kicked out of the Lands Between, right? So, like I said, I do legitimately think a lot of this stuff starts getting pieced together a lot more neatly when you work from this framework, which obviously sounds a bit vain coming from me, the person who's proposing this, but I definitely recommend playing with these ideas a bit more on your own if you're curious about that. I do have a couple videos on my channel where I talk about it in roundabout ways. Like the very first Elden Ring video that I did kind of gets at some of the idea, but beyond that, if you are very curious, I do have like an archived timeline stream on my channel in like the main section. It's also like way back in the lives and whatnot. So there's a lot to cover there. I go over a lot of these ideas in depth in my video where I talk about the Crucible and the Great Tree and whatnot, and that's an archived live, I think. But it's just like me talking about a Miro board, or talking through with a Miro board, so it's not like a super polished product by any means. But yeah, that'll be it for me for the night. I'd like to thank all of you again for joining me throughout the streams, whether you're catching me live or in the VODs and making appearances afterward. I appreciate that. And we will be playing Lies of P Blind on stream starting Friday at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And tomorrow we will continue the kind of lore and gaming video reactions until then. So, we'll be going live again 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope to see you next time. Take care, stay safe. Last Protagonist out.